Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. I did what I consider an epic introduction coming up here. Um, and it's stuff I haven't talked about before. There's no need for pictures in this. It has to do with my, you know, uh, spiritual situation. And people have tried to call me a master and things on this channel and stuff like that. And I've talked about it in a way I haven't talked about it before. And so that'll be over when this picture is done. When you no longer see this picture, my signature Pox of the Future picture with my dogs Tulsi and Buddy and our tinfoil hats. But I think it's an epic, at least for me, it's very important voiceover. And then I'm going to get into stuff. Joe Biden's worst gaffe ever, where he confuses the word death penalty with death threats, and it's bad. And the whole thing's bad. I just saw something from George Wallace that is epic and needs to be addressed. The comedian, politically oriented. There's a that woman who's married to Doug Walls, Dougie Fresh's Walls, Tim Walls' wife. I forget her name, but I don't really need to remember it. And then a bunch of other gaffes and things. So this is kind of a loaded one. Just a lot of epic stuff that's happening. So let's get into it here. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. This is a really important audio, at least in terms of, well, for me it is, for what I think it is, right? This is going to be the introduction to the 159th Journey series, and also to a video, my next video that'll probably be up on, well, I guess Monday, is it October 14th or 15th? And so, imagine, that you were playing a video game and the avatar in your video game hijacked your consciousness and your physical body and pulled you into the video game. And your avatar had a life of its own. It was making its own decisions. And oftentimes those decisions were deviant and evil. And you were just sitting there powerless, observing without the ability to affect your avatar, and you're sucked into the video game, and you're going through this, this like hellscape, and you're just watching these bad decisions, and your avatar's doing demonic things and negative things, and you're like appalled by those things, but you're just sitting there watching. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Being John Malkovich, where John Cusack is a puppet master, and he finds a doorway into John Malkovich's head. And he's able to puppet John Malkovich. And then these other people hijack it, and at the end of the movie, spoiler alert, he gets stuck inside John Malkovich, and these other people, or maybe some kid or somebody is, there's a room that goes into John Malkovich's head, and the persons are controlling it. And I think he's in love with a woman, and I guess she's in love with another woman, and he's got to watch them, watch the whole the interaction, and be a party to something where he's just in some sort of a hell, like everything, total loss of control, like he was being manipulative and other things, right? But either way, this is the idea that you were in the avatar of, you're in a video game, and the avatar has hijacked your consciousness, and you're stuck in the video game with no control about the decision making, and you're just, perpetually there without being able to get out of it. And that's what's happened here for pretty much all of us in terms of our souls and our egos. Our egos have, hijacked our soul's purpose here on planet Earth, and we're stuck in this simulation, this video game. And our soul just has to sit there and watch us make one bad decision, getting us deeper and deeper entrenched in the, the earthbound, earthbound humanity that we're part of our human cells, and getting farther and farther and more entrenched to where it becomes almost impossible for us to clean off all the impressions and, experience all the negativity we have to experience to get out of this, this trap, right? And our souls are just sitting there like, fuck, so just, helpless to, do anything to even one warning after another, one intervention after another, one obstacle after another to get the ego to finally awaken and turn itself around, and it just won't. And that's the problem with humanity. It's the collective egos of the human beings hijacking your spiritual essence and binding you to this nightmare of a planet, and with no way to escape because you're too entrenched and connected to the negativity here. And some people it's worse than others, right? And so, I wanted to also talk about this and segue into this because I was having these thoughts. There are people who started doing the Gratefullness meditation and they were calling me master. There was Master Charji and Master Babaji and Master Lalaji. They were people who had mastered themselves. And it wasn't a master-slave relationship like you think of course, you think about in cults or in terms of, slavery or something like that. Master has a negative connotation. It's somebody who, in the Sajmark system, is your example, and they're helping you reach the goal that they themselves have achieved. And so that's the contract between you, that they are responsible to guide you through it's like there's different words used, but guide is the one they like to use. Babaji, the second master, said guide, and he compared himself to a Sherpa. Babaji was an uneducated man and wasn't, didn't have the sort of modern day sophistication and things and education that people had, but he was, spiritually, there was no match to him in human history. And he said he was like a Sherpa that would tie himself to you and then guide you up Mount Everest, right? And, the Sherpa was well adapted to this process, and if you fell, the Sherpa falls with you, right? Like that was the kind of commitment was there. And so people started to call me master, and I was like, yeah, I'm not. Just because like I have some, higher spiritual qualities or been given access to some levels of consciousness and things, and that knowledge that manifests itself here. And it doesn't make me a master. And like, just because you have moved spiritually, any person who's on the spiritual path is going to seem superior to people who aren't. Like, there's just no comparison because you're on a completely different level. And as you get older and you move forward and you're farther along in your journey, people are looking and seeing that you're above them on some level of consciousness and things. That doesn't make the person a master. There's plenty of saints and spiritual people that had a little bit of success and progress, and then people worshiped them, and that's just not right. And again, you should never worship a spiritual person. They're an example of what you can become, and not in an egotistical way. They're helping you bring out your best self, the self within, the self with a capital S, your soul, right? But I wanted to talk about that in terms of my commitment. I've said this in different videos, and I thought I would share some of it because I was thinking about it. And so the Sajmarg masters of the system, they say, what the dynamics of the master abhyasi, spiritual aspirant relationship, is that you can quit at any time, right? And this is significant to the Indian guru tradition, where the guru would often manipulate you and, say he was going to curse you or, say that you're going to suffer if you leave him. And people were so fear-based, they would pay the guru and they would keep on staying with him, even if he was a fake guru and they knew it. This whole idea of what was that term, that wrestling term, see if I still have it up there. Kayfabe, right? Where everyone, all these thieves that work together and, create these illusions. And, it's one of the things that's happened with the Sajmark system, this thing with heartfulness, is that all these people are going along with something and no one's willing to say the emperor has no clothes, the master has fallen, the Daji has fallen. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through this. But kayfabe is a big part of it, this idea that, everybody just goes along with the BS, the bullshit. And so, the one of these fundamental dynamics is that the master of the Sajmark system has to bless you, which they don't do in India with many of them. And also they're responsible to find you a more suitable teacher. Like they have to pray and, and change your destiny or whatever so you can find a more suitable master. Like it's their duty, okay, I'm not, the right one for you, then I'll work my best, to help you find the right one. But the other part of it is that the master can never say, fuck you, get out of here, you piece of shit, right? Like they can never diss you. They can never get rid of you. They're bound to you as long as if you say, I don't want you to be my master anymore, then there's that. But no matter what you do, how ungrateful you are, how much you might turn and slander the master, how much you keep on making the same fucking bad choices time and time again and creating more and more grossness. The Sajmarg masters transmit to you and they see inside your internal system and then they clean whatever's there. And what would happen is they would clean, Babaji would clean, Charji, they would clean these practitioners to where there was like pretty much no grossness. There would be some future things that had to manifest, some things that were, time, they were like latent types of things. But they would clean you as well as you could be cleaned up to that point in time. And you would leave and you would go immediately start making more spiritual grossness. And they would clean you again. Charji says, you guys are using the system and the master like a toilet. You go out, you indulge, and you do things that create spiritual impressions and spiritual grossness, and then you come and expect me to clean it off you, right? And he did, because that's what he's supposed to do. Like time and time again. There was a time that these European kids, the younger ones, they're hippies, and they went to see Babaji, who was in the northern part of India, and then they went to visit Charji on their way back to whatever they were, whatever country they were going back to, Europe. And Charji looked at them, he was giving them a sitting, and he said after the sitting, what did you guys do on the train down here? They took a train from the northern part of India, like a 16-hour train. And they said, what do you mean? He said, well, every time anybody leaves Babaji, their inner system is completely pristine, and he cleans everything that's there, right? And you guys are gross as fuck, right? You guys are like have all this gross heaviness, and like, oh, we smoked hash on the way down, which is, it's drug use is a good way to create spiritual grossness because of all of it, it's what it does to you physically and then, spiritually. And he said, well, don't do that anymore, right? And Babaji had always said, only forbidden is forbidden, which these boomer hippies took as a loophole, because Babaji didn't want people suffering the sin of disobedience on top of their already bad decision-making. So he said only forbidden is forbidden, because he's trying to get away from all the religious heaviness and shame and guilt and things, which caused its own level of grossness that he had to clean, right? But these people would come back, and make bad decisions and expect the master to do all the work. They wouldn't change. They wouldn't grow as people. They wouldn't develop their character qualities. I was made a preceptor years ago. There was this saintly guy, was a, kind of a, one of those people that's like spiritual, but also, not afraid to say shit, like he was more, somebody who was dynamic. And he was talking to me about being a preceptor. He said, the first time he gave a sitting, he walked into he had this vision that he's transmitting to this person, a woman. He was giving the sitting to the woman. And he walked into a room, which he said was her heart. And he saw there was a door, and he opened the door, and he saw this room and there was a door there, and he goes into it, he opens the door, and then he visualizes all this sewage, all this disgusting cesspool type water is just pouring out, from the person, and he's just there and in front of it. And, he's like, well, that sucks. And he goes and talks to Babaji about it. And Babaji said, yeah, that happens. Well, what happened to the woman? He said, what happened to the person you're giving the sitting? He said, she had this glow. After, the sitting was over, she was light and happy and, these things. And that's what the Sajmark system does for people. But there's supposed to be some responsibility on their end to stop making the bad decisions that create this spiritual grossness. And they don't, right? And so the master of the system is just obligated to completely do their part of the work, while these ungrateful, low-minded, people just keep on making the same mistakes over and over again. And I wouldn't be down for that, right? Like as a person, not that I'm saying, I understand why it has to be done. I understand kind of how it's done. I just don't want to do it, right? Like, this idea, this, that you constantly have to look at people. Every person in the world is a potential spiritual person. And anybody that's sent to these masters, they're obligated to look at them like they were sent by God. And I could probably talk about hours about what that means and how you treat somebody. That this person is being sent to you by God and you have to render them spiritual service without, disregarding what a piece of shit the person is and how unlikable they are and how reprehensible they are. It doesn't matter. Everyone in the world, Kamala Harris, Trump, anybody, some mass murderer, some serial killer, doesn't matter. You have to disregard their mistakes, their egos, and look for their soul, the saint within, and pull that out. And, luckily for all of us that have benefited from the system, he's done that for us. And I can understand, doing that and passing it forward and doing that for other people. I just, can't, part of me just can't wrap my mind around that kind of commitment, right? That, anytime God asks you to do some service, you have to drop everything and do that. Do the spiritual work and act as a conduit and do this spiritual work. Oftentimes people would come to the master and the master would rearrange the person's internal world and clean it and get them on the right path and start helping them to manifest the conditions where they can be a spiritual person. And the person wouldn't even know any of that, right? Maybe they felt good, they felt happy, they felt relieved, but they didn't know the blessings that had been bestowed on them. And they'd go screw it up and then come back, and the master had to go do more of these things, right? And so, think about like that kind of commitment where you have to disregard the small, egotistical, shitty nature of people and all the stuff that, prejudices you against them and makes you dislike them as people, and constantly render them spiritual service at your own, like dropping everything. These guys invited people in their houses. Like I went over to Chargie's houses and there was 200 people there waiting to see him, bugging the neighbors and all these things. And then, when he was in the ashram, he would just have lines of people wanting to talk to him. And, oftentimes it was about bullshit things that had nothing to do with their spiritual development. They wanted him to fix some crisis or some problem they were having with their kids or some health problem, like he was fucking Santa Claus, which has nothing to do with the system, right? And he would have to, just listen to these people and, what he'd say, give them a patient hearing. Sometimes he said people just need to be heard, and he would sit there and listen to them. And, even though it had nothing to do with him and he couldn't really help them because it was, had nothing to, only he was there for one reason, and it was help them to connect to the divinity within him. But, that kind of commitment, and I can't even express it fully, but all these people, like all these sheeple people, and like even the people in the, let's say they said, Paul, we want you to take over the Sajmarg mission after Daji fucked it up, right? And all these people who, some of them like helped to like blackball me, or, some of them spied on me. There's all this negativity, right? And I can, like, I'm not a vengeful person. I can forgive anything because I realize my own, when I look at my kids and they make mistakes, I think about what my decision making was back then. When you're young and stupid, you make bad decisions. And I don't hold grudges. I don't, I'm not vengeful, and I can easily forgive people. But I don't forget, and I don't trust people, and I don't, they're just going to do it again, right? All these things. But it's, so that's one thing, the things that they've done to me personally, but that's very minimal. But the way they've betrayed their spiritual master, they say they loved this guy Charji, and they watched this piece of shit Daji throw him under the bus. And Daji's only really unforgivable thing, or his big mistake, is he wasn't willing to do all the things I just said a master has to do. Daji wanted his ego to be boosted. Like he wanted to get something out of it for his ego. And, you don't want that as a spiritual person, as a spiritual master. You want to be completely humbled all the time, and that you're bowing before God, and letting God use your mind and your body and your consciousness to elevate people and to elevate, do spiritual work. And you're always saying it's about God and not you. You don't want praise. You don't want people looking at you and saying how great you are and things like that. It's not helpful, right? I mean, sometimes it's something they have to do, and it makes you feel good because you recognize that the work's working. But you don't want to ever make it about you, right? All you ever will be is a conduit, like you'll be a pipe where water flows through. In this case, it's divine transmission, divine work, right? And Dodgy wanted something. This guy, he wanted to be, he needed something on an egotistical level, and it made him fall. And all these people that went along with it, they've completely betrayed the system and their former master who did so much work for them, because Dodgy has thrown this guy under the bus and treated him badly and bringing in scams and destroying the system, right? And so, I mean, I would have to overlook all these people doing that to somebody that they claimed they loved, right? Which is hard to do because I know what they've done, and I can understand it. I can understand their weaknesses. I can understand, how tough it is and, all these things, the personal indoctrination they grew up, especially people who grew up in India who it's so hard for them to break free from their gurus, even if the guru has fallen, and they obviously should. It's hard because culturally you just don't do that. I understand a lot of these things. But I'd have to overlook all of those things and just, treat people who I don't respect and don't like as, giving up my own time and energy and my own personal time to serve them spiritually. And that's the commitment that the master of the system has. And I'm, at least right now, I'm not willing to make that commitment, right? Like it's not even like I'm unwilling to make the commitment. Like I know I can't do it. Like I can't overlook these things, right? I can't overlook all the things that people have done. To the best of my ability, I render service as I can in the gratefulness meditation and the information I do on these videos, and that's about all I can do. I can't have, I would just get depressed and bummed out by all the bad decisions people make and the, constant. I mean, I did it when I had to work as a counselor and sitting there listening to people whine and piss and moan. And then you would, if you just told them the truth and what they need to do, they would get pissed at you and walk out or whatever because they're not really looking for solutions. They just want to dump their shit on somebody, right? That's the majority of people, whether they go to therapy or they go into spirituality. They want to dump their burdens on you and then create more burdens. Once you relieve them of their burdens, they want to create more burdens. And so, I mean, I understand what the value, and I appreciate what the previous master did for me, because he overlooked my shortcomings and my limitations and helped pull out a better version of myself that's still, a work in progress, but it's, got me on the right path. And so, I want everyone else to experience that. But there's a lack of willingness for people to rise up to that. And I'm aware of it. And, but just in terms of my own inability to overlook those things and be that kind of person and commit to something like this, right? And that's why I'm not a master, right? Because a master would do that. Like that's a true master, somebody who's, given up their own personal choices, their own personal sovereignty, and able to, rise up and do whatever God wants them to do in every second of the day, regardless of their personal desires or what they, their personal preferences and what they want to do. You want to do one thing, then God said, no, I need you to do this. Okay, master, I'll do that. That's what, you're talking to God. Like, you think you want to do something, and God says, no, you're doing this instead. And constantly having to change set and change what you're doing and be open and, okay, this is, you had these plans to do this, but now God has, sent somebody to you and you have to, I'm scrapping what I wanted to do and I have to serve God and help this person, right? Which is, it's great that there's people like that, but I'm not one of them. Right? At least it's not now. Anyways, and I'm not advocating for that. I'm saying that that's just the case it is, Like I hope there are more people that are able to do that. Because humanity needs it. Like, we can't survive without that kind of work being done. That's why the Sajmark system to me is a solution, because you need people who are able to, help people like, desperate humanity who's, their egos have hijacked these souls, like I said at the beginning of the video game, and help them get back on the right path and clean off all this garbage, this spiritual grossness that keeps them bound to their egotistical lives and their demonic existence on planet Earth. Anyways, let's get into some other stuff here. Okay, so I thought more about what I was saying about, being a spiritual master, a master in oneself, and committing to a life of service. And, it's not something somebody does all at once. You have to warm up to the idea. You have to, try it sometimes and see that there's advantages for you. Not just advantages, it just makes you feel good, and it's congruent with your soul wants you to become, right? And so in terms of what I was saying about my own personal situation, there is a valid reason to commit to this kind of work. I mean, one, it's because it's, ultimately everyone has to, if you want to reach the highest levels of your, spiritual capacity, right? It's what your soul wants. What everyone's soul wants you to manifest on this level, manifest your human, your soul, your soul's full expression, to where your ego is minimized and you're just doing what your soul always intended for you to do, right? And every spiritual person, every person becomes a saint, a master. There's different levels of this. They all end up getting bummed out by, they're being sent here to uplift humanity. And humanity just doesn't cooperate, right? And, they always die miserable. They get stabbed in the back, and they, Master Chargy said, to do with Jesus, that it's always 3 out of 12. Judas betrayed him, and Thomas doubted him, and Peter denied him, right? And there's always 3 out of 12. I mean, it's just this ratio that someone close to you is always going to stab you in the back. They're going to get jealous. They're going to be pissed off. They're going to, these are the things that happen. People you let into your, sort of your inner circle, your, people who are close to you, who are your, real disciples. At least 3 out of 12 of them are going to betray you, or, turn on you in some way. People are going to turn on you, disappoint you, and they're going to underperform, right? And you're going to leave disappointed because, they all had this potential, and they flirt with this potential, but they don't realize their potential. And so it's always a rough ride for the people who end up embracing this role. And so it doesn't matter whether they do that or not. It doesn't matter whether they fuck off or not. These people, screw up, and they don't, do what they could have done. It doesn't matter what becomes of your teachings, like what's happened to all these religious teachings, where they're bastardized and monetized and turned into the exact opposite of what they were intended to do. It doesn't matter about any of those things. It's just that you've done what you're supposed to do. That's all you can control. And if you, reach the pinnacle of your human expression, your soul's expression, then you've done what you could do, right? It doesn't matter that these other people can't do that, or, whatever their problem is, whatever it is. And so there's that, right? Like your position, your accomplishments, your, whatever you've done, your success in the spiritual field is already, it doesn't matter how the success or failure of your movement doesn't determine your whatever rewards or whatever it is for you. And then I want to say rewards, you've achieved something. And so it doesn't blemish your achievement. So, the people who you're serving are the people that you're serving God, and these, by serving these people. And when they fuck, when they fuck it up, it doesn't matter, right? In terms of your personal achievements. But it still sucks, right? On a human level, it still sucks. It's a disappointment. You want to see yourself succeed. You want to see humanity succeed. You want to see the people that you're sent down to uplift. You want to see them be uplifted, right? All these things. And, that's part of my whole thing about it is, again, I don't want to be resentful, right? And I think I would be, because, it would just be, it's hard to differentiate between serving God and serving these people. And it's already frustrating just dealing, I don't really like that many people. So, I'd have a hard time pushing back my own personal attitude and prejudice and things. I mean, I'd have to be a much better person I am now, or I have to be much more evolved. There has been progress, so I guess that's possible for me to do. certainly as I get older and I could care, when you get older, you care less about such things, right? Things bother you less and less, and the idiocracy, and you just whatever. Oh, who cares, right? What difference does it make? Whatever's going on in the world, and I mean, I'm more and more like that just in general. It doesn't matter. I'm less concerned about what's happening and what's being done. And people are talking about these hurricanes that are hitting. Today's Thursday, October 10th, and there was two back-to-back hurricanes that hit in Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, and then the second one that hit Florida really hard. The first one hit Florida hard. Florida always gets smacked by these hurricanes, right? And so, people are talking about weather modification. I'm like, well, whether it's weather modification or God, you're still fucked, right? Like, there's people that won't, never recover financially, and their lifestyle is, there's, empty stores now, roads that won't be repaired for years, that highways and things that people are using, truckers aren't able to deliver goods to stores that are empty, and, people are suffering, right? In terms of what their lifestyle was. And that's just going to keep on continuing. And so, it's just, it's the New Deal that we're going to get, whether it's the people who control the system or God, it's the same thing, right? Like, either way, it doesn't matter, like, what's happening. It's always God. Everything that happens is God. Everything that's happening right now and will happen in the future, every nuance of it is God. Ultimately, it comes back to God, right? But anyways, going back to what I was saying, I haven't been given the proper support and the proper, spiritual evolution to, to be someone on that level, right? The level I'm talking about in terms of committing. But, the commitment isn't there on my part, right? And I can see that, and I'm not saying I'm okay with it or not. I know what could be done. At least I have a sense of it, and I know what it would take, and I'm just really not all that into it. And so, I see that at least knowing, like, you're not doing it is kind of important. People think that they're good people or they're rocking it, and they're as good as they could be, but there's so much more that you could always do. And that's my point. You can always be, a lot of it is what people think is being a good person is performatives for other people, so they can say, oh, look at what a good person I am, right? And in reality, they're just, it's not sincere, because the real work that you do is silent, and it's, there's saints that come down and do work on humanity, and no one ever knew their name. No one even knew how evolved they were. They came down, they did their work, they died, they left. And they're just, they came down to serve God. And, there's been evolutionary movements and things that have happened. Humanity has gained from spiritual movements that have happened for, hundreds of thousands of years. And people don't know all the people that participated, all the souls, because they don't do it for popularity or fame or these things, right? And so, everyone's got at least should be a sense that there's always more you could be doing, right? And be aware of what you could be doing. If you're aware of it, at least, if you don't do it now, you might do it into the future, right? And so that's at least, something that I could say that at least I understand that there's these levels. And there's levels in between what I'm talking about in terms of being a master. And there are these wonderful preceptors that were in the Sajmark system, and they were just totally dedicated and just wonderful people. They drive 5 hours to give me and my family sittings, me and my ex sittings, and other people that lived that didn't have a preceptor. I saw things that were, blow your mind in terms of their service. And some people did it, just from the goodness of their heart. Others were more, just doing it because it's what you're supposed to do, or, whatever, they thought they were going to get something. But, there's all these different levels for these things. But, you can always do more, right? You can always participate in the giving or the serving of God. And if you just have to volunteer for it, and most people don't. Anyway, so I thought I would just clear those things up, right? It's just, it's important to understand that there is value to doing something, even if you don't get any recognition or any credit, and, because there is no recognition and credit for really anything. They build you a statue. Who gives a shit when you're dead, right? Like, you're going to, it doesn't matter what people think of you. It doesn't matter what humanity judges you as, good, bad, or indifferent. Doesn't matter what people, what their consensus opinion of you is. It's just important that, like, your relationship with God and your soul you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you're moving forward in some way. Anyway, so let's get into the other stuff here. So I just added something to my video about Mr. McMahon, this whole thing about the depravity of wrestling. And this guy, Vince McMahon, from the documentary on Netflix I was covering in my previous video here. Of course, this is also going in the Journey series. And I had this thought last night. I felt just a sense of like spiritual bliss. And I just want to say this because I haven't said anything like this before. There are plenty of good spiritual systems out there, or systems where someone can improve themselves in the material world, right? There's just levels to it. And the Sajmark system is the most vertical connect you to God system that's ever existed. And so it is, why I always say it's the hope for humanity, because the only hope for humanity is that humanity somehow ends up rising up to a level where they can connect to the divinity within them, right? Which is what the Sajmark system is meant to do. So that's why I feel like it's the best system, and to me the only thing that's important. But I've experienced other systems that help you. And I'm doing those systems now in terms of dietary systems and, supplements and exercise. And there's all kinds of ways that people can improve themselves, right? Like people have all these health issues because they're eating toxic foods. And if they just learn to, eat in a different way, read the ingredients, which I talk about so much in my videos, reading the ingredients of the poison that they're putting in your body. Or, there's lots of religious movements and spiritual movements that are at least helpful. There's all kinds of ways you can improve your situation, improve yourself. And people aren't doing any of those things. Like, they resist them. I was thinking about all these people who watch the wrestling and, they watch the opposite, right? They want to eat poison. They hear that something they're eating is bad for them, and they know it is. Like, they have a reaction to it. Cigarettes, coffee, something that happens. 20% of people can't drink coffee, for example, or, like they just react to it poorly and drink it anyway. It's like, I've always been very sensitive to caffeine, and I drank coffee for a while, and I switched to chai, and I put the littlest amount of black tea in it, just a pinch. I mean, almost nothing. And, I realized it was, making my heart race, and it never really, I just didn't do well with it. So I've minimized, first I quit altogether, and now I eat like little bits of chocolate occasionally to, I found that it helps me just get my heart rate up enough to where it's, where I'm able to, sort of function. Otherwise I have like low blood pressure or something. But you have to be able to give things up and change your life, based in your health, based in what's working for you, seeing the things that hurt you. And there's all kinds of ways that, just the smallest little ways that you can embrace some sort of system. The religions, when they're done properly, they help people, at least on a lower level. They maybe not connect to God directly, because that's not what the religion itself is about, but the teachings that are there, right? You can find Jesus's teachings and do your own thing. Like, every one of these spiritual movements that started off sincerely with somebody who had a spiritual, epiphany, or became a good person, a spiritual person. But what I'm saying is that people can improve themselves. There are things out there that are good things that help people on whatever level they're on reach another level. There's people that, there's the 12-step program, and, I don't endorse these programs. I mean, I have a master's degree in counseling, and I don't love the psychological model. Some models are better than others. Solution-focused therapy is one of the better ones. But there are great therapists and teachers and people out there in whatever profession. There are good people, evolved people out there that can help you. There's things that can help you in therapy if you use it correctly. There's, yoga, different forms of yoga, that it can improve your health. And, if you improve your health, your mind works better and clearer, and you detoxify your system. So there's all these things out there, what I'm saying, that are good and helpful. And people run away from them like they're the plague, right? Like, people don't want to self-improve. Just do something, right? Do something to make yourself a better person. Like, aspire to be better than you are now. But there's so many people who are locked into what they're doing, and they just want to wallow in their, demonic, egotistical lifestyle and their hedonistic, gross lifestyle with, no sense that they have to get better and advance in some way, form, or whatever it might be. So I thought I would add that here because it isn't just about like the Sidemark system and people rejecting it or not want to try it. People don't want to try anything that's good for them. They don't want to try anything that's going to make them change and evolve and self-improve. And that's where we are as a species. I mean, I would think it's maybe 80% or more people just don't want to change or can't change or, they're just too overwhelmed and they can't do anything to better themselves or their situation, even financially. Like, there's people out there who are just struggling every day to make ends meet and just struggling to, get through the day or whatever their lives and, just to better yourself financially, get educated or get trained or come up with an idea or do something to get out of your, your slave job that's, your job that's sucking the life out of you. There's, relationships that's, they're destroying you. They can't, just there isn't any sense of, oh my God, I can't live like this. I can't, this is not the way life should be, and I got to change. Just find something, do something, right? And people just don't. And so, I just thought I'd add that. Like I've never said that before. It's not like the Sidemark system is the only system that helps people improve. There are millions of systems and people out there and things that can help you improve. Just moving to a better location that's not as depressive, getting away from bad social circumstances, a job where you're just brought down to a lower level, and people that are, criminal and, evil and whatever that are sucking you dry and changing your, taking you down to a lower vibration. What you're watching on TV, how it negatively affects you, turn it off. Eating poisonous food that you can feel is negatively affecting you. Stop doing that, right? There's all these ways people can self-improve, and they don't choose to do it. And so that's why humanity's fucked, because there's no sense of like any, I got to get better. What does that mean? I don't know. For each person, it's different, but just, whatever level you're on, rise up to the next level, like, move forward in some way. And most people are moving in the opposite direction. And the contamination of the system around us with saturation of bad decisions and, egotistical, demonic orientation to the world and the conditions that it creates around you, the atmosphere, the energy in the air and the vibrations, it just binds humanity to a lower level of consciousness and de-evolving into idiocracy. Anyways, I thought I'd add this here because it's, important. Okay. This is Biden delivers remarks on impact of Hurricane Milton. And so he had to come out and they had to get him out there because, severe damage and, it's a hurricane. And MSNBC decided, I'd already seen this. And so MSNBC had the balls to come out and say, and I got a bunch of stuff to come that's great. Like I would normally lead with the Walsh's wives. She's singing a fight song. Like it's great. But so many things to get to here. That's why wonderful. But I have to lead with this because this is, Jojo Magoo's last stand and all of it. And they say, are you kidding me? Biden cooks Trump. Get a life. Now he's going to say get a life. And I'm going to mock the shit out of it because that's what I do because it's totally mockable. And they're saying him saying that he's cooking Trump. That's how bad Morning Joe is. And so.
To civilian authorities.
What's that word? What kind of authorities? Let's go back to that.
To civilian authorities.
Civilian authorities. Okay. Parkinson's showing its ugly head already.
And that apparently is going very well. As well as from the Coast Guard and from FEMA, we've received reports. We focused on what the American military can do like no one else can, provide emergency support for communities in need.
It's like he's like, his speech is like the equivalent of like you're on a slip and slide, but you're standing up and you're like, you're on ice skates and like, or you're on ice in your socks or something and you're, whoa. Like it's like he's like just in that state where he's about to fall, like conversationally, like verbally.
And we're required by the governor and the federal and required by the governor in the affected states. I've spoken to all the governors. Not today, all of them, but I've spoken to all of them thus far.
In the past, I've spoken to, I'm pretty sure, every one of them at some point in my life.
And how we can be ready to go in an instant when the call comes. At my direction, the Defense Secretary Austin has provided a range of capabilities both to Florida for Hurricane Milton, as well as the states impacted by Hurricane Helene.
Okay, my wife just told me that piece of shit DeSantis signed some kind of a bill that makes it hard for people to go after the insurance companies when they don't pay. You know, what they do is they make you get flood insurance, and flood insurance is really expensive. And it's, astronomical, because flooding is like a part of, there's all these places that flooded in North Carolina that they never thought they'd flood, right? Or Georgia, these places that got hit by Helene. And people don't have flood insurance. So they get hit by the hurricane, which is wind and these other things, which usually doesn't do that much damage. A tree falls on your house, it's limited. It's when the place floods, like in New Orleans years ago, and now in these other places, when it floods, then it's, that's what it, like they consider that flood damage. And that's what, wrecks your house, destroys everything. And most of these people are suffering what the insurance companies consider flood damage. Now, people are thinking the hurricane covers flood, but it doesn't. It doesn't cover the storm surge. So it covers the wind or whatever, it's the specific policy. They find a way not to pay you. That's what insurance companies do. They have a team of people to say you don't have a claim, and, go ahead and hire a lawyer if you think you can. And now DeSantis has made it hard for the people to sue the insurance companies because he's a piece of shit that took money from them. Maybe he's on his way out of politics or whatever, But who knows? But he ain't going national because he turned out to be such a little weasel. Like a worse version of Trump, like a more Weasley version of Trump. But, so that's what's up.
And the more capabilities are available, we assess some pressing needs, we can get whatever they need. To the servicemen and women who are on the ground responding to these disasters, thank you.
Okay, what was that? That was not even, these are the disasters.
Thank you.
Let's go back here just a little bit more.
On the ground responding to these disasters. Thank you.
So that was not articulate. He doesn't fully express the word that he is trying to say.
Thank you for your professionalism, your dedication to every mission you're given.
He can't get through this. This is a major catastrophe for people's lives, and it's and he can't get through this thing, right?
You're repeating it again. This is a whole of government effort. It also includes the Department of Energy, Department of Transportation, Department of Health and Human Services, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which is providing mortgage relief for impacted homeowners.
So he's reading this, right? And, as a politician, reading a teleprompter is, a national politician, reading a teleprompter is a must. It's a thing you have to do. It's a requirement for the job that you're doing. And so he can't do that. He can't speak on his own. He can't just go out there and wing it. We know what happens. We saw it happen in debate. And now he can't read from a teleprompter. This is bad. He's just babbling through this thing. There's no confidence in the guy's capabilities, mentally or verbally.
As directed, FEMA is going to open disaster recovery centers all across the impacted.
It's like a guy who's struggling to read what's on the eye chart, right?
Communities right away.
RKL, L, T, I don't know.
So there's one stop the residents can go to learn about the support they might need, and they'll be advertised where those places are. 3 million people are without power, but more than 40 million power line workers have come from around the country, from Canada to Florida, to restore power across the state. In addition, the Federal Aviation has authorized Florida Power and Light to fly large drones before other manned aircraft can get up in the sky.
So what is he doing with his hands? He doesn't even, he certainly doesn't know the words he's reading. There's no, you have to, when you're reading, you have to articulate. There's a way of expressing what's on the page that makes it more understandable, right? When you're reading, and anybody who's doing this job has to do that. It has to bring life to these words because he's trying to instill confidence in the American people that he and them are on the job, but he's not. Like this is not somebody who's confident in what he's doing.
Up in the sky to quickly assess the damage on the ground so ground crews can restore power as quickly as possible. The Coast Guard and the Army Corps of Engineers are assessing how fast they can reopen the port of Tampa to get fuel, food, water, and other basic.
See, this is an easy thing, right? Like, this is, this isn't about something that's controversial. That's something that, you are trying to sell to the American people, and you have to word it in a way and express it in a way to make it sound better. It's something it's not cut and dry. Like, this is people who are out of power, who are desperate for food. Their houses have been destroyed. They have no place to sleep, like things like this, right? Like people who are just in the whole community. Like it's not like, whole towns being destroyed and things like this. You can't, there's nowhere to go. There's no water. There's no whatever, right? So getting those people, restoring power, like that's one, that's easy, to express. And then, all these other things that they have to do, getting people fed, all the things that need to happen. Like people know what needs to happen, right? Getting life back to the way it used to be, rebuilding the place, so they just have to express that. It's not hard. Like the message has to be like, we understand the problem and we're working on solutions. And so it's easy to write this thing for the people who write it. And so he has to deliver it in a way with confidence. It's an easy sell, right? He's not having to, some nuanced thing that's selling people something they don't want to hear or don't want to have. Like sometimes that's what he has to do as a politician. Like it's something they all have to do, selling people stuff that they're not wanting to, that they don't want to buy. But everybody there in the nation wants this thing to go away. They want it to be fixed, right? And so he has to just read the fix, what how they're going to fix it. And so all he has to do is read it with confidence in a way that people look at him and say, oh, this guy's on the job. But he can't do that because he's got Parkinson's, he's got dementia. And so he's just, babbling through this thing.
Goods flowing into the area again and quickly. Additionally, Vice President Harris and I said...
So he had to do that. Like she wouldn't be there. She wasn't running for president. He wasn't senile, right? Like if he was mentally competent, he wouldn't even have to say her name because he'd be running himself. Like that's the whole thing. This is a guy who, if he can't run for president, then he shouldn't be president, right?
Yesterday, and we'll say it again, to anyone who seeks to take advantage of our fellow Americans' desperation, whether you're a company engaging in price gouging or a citizen trying to scam your neighbors, we will go after you and we will hold you accountable.
How are you gonna find out about somebody scamming their neighbors? Right? Let's say your neighbor wants bottled water and you charge them $80. How are you going to go after that person? Like, it's silly. Like, it's just they're not going to do anything about price. It's just, they're not going to do this. Like, it's just a, silly warning that nobody takes seriously, right?
Now, not only that, our fellow Americans are putting their lives on the line to do this dangerous work and receive death penalties. Some received death penalties yesterday.
Okay, so then he just botched death penalties.
And received death penalties. Some received death penalties yesterday as a result of reckless, irresponsible, relentless disinformation and outright lies that continue.
They had death penalties? What do you mean death penalties?
And received death penalties. Some received.
What is death penalties? Let's go back to that.
Neighbors. We will go after you and we will hold you accountable. Now, not only that, our fellow Americans are putting their lives on the line to do this dangerous work and receive death penalties. Some received death penalties yesterday as a result of reckless, irresponsible, relentless disinformation.
Do you mean death threats? Not death penalties. You just said death fucking penalties, bro. That means you put them to death. That means that they are on death row right now or you just executed them. And you're saying they're working to save people, but we gave them death penalties? What you meant is death threats. Listen to this again. This guy's this is a huge, this is probably his biggest gaffe ever. You can't say death penalties.
Not only that, our fellow Americans are putting their lives on the line to do this dangerous work and receive death penalties. Some received death penalties yesterday as a result of reckless, irresponsible, relentless disinformation and outright lies that continue to flow. Those who engage in such lies...
when you say death threats, which is like you're saying these guys are doing hard work, they're out there trying to save people, but they're receiving death threats because disinformation has made these people sound worse, right? Now, of course, we disagree with what he's talking about, FEMA workers and things. But he said they received death penalties, which would mean you guys were doing that. The government was giving them a death sentence, right? Like it's a fucked up, like it's just a major gaffe. So MSNBC has the balls to come out here and said that he slams Trump here, right? That he's, what is he, nails Trump, whatever it was, cooks Trump, that he cooks Trump. Like he is embarrassment, right? And when he was still running for president, this is the kind of thing they would have pointed out how out of touch he is and how messed up he is. But instead, they, because they're spinning, like Mika said, we're not spinning right now. Let me show you that, the Mika spinning, the meme here.
Okay, so as you can see, you won't see us spinning here on Morning Joe at all.
So this was a couple of days after the debate when Joe Biden, shit himself on the debate stage with Donald Trump. And, they had set him up, right? And so Joe Scarborough, they had been the worst spinners, basically lying. Not basically, just flat out lying about Joe Biden being a competent person. They were the worst. Like, it was embarrassing how bad they were. And so she's basically admitting that, she's admitting that spin all the time. We're not spinning today, but you were spinning because it was part of a plan to get rid of Joe Biden. But now that he's no longer running for president, they're back making it sound like he's mentally competent when he's not. That he, cooked Donald Trump when he's going to embarrass himself again. This is one of the worst public speaking moments of Joe Biden's career. It is really bad. At a time where he shouldn't, he can't really be bad. But here it is. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's listen to this one more time because it's his biggest gaffe ever.
Quickly. Additionally, Vice President Harris and I said yesterday, and we'll say it again.
They'll say it again.
Now, not only that, our fellow Americans are putting their lives on the line to do this dangerous work and receive death penalties. Some received death penalties yesterday as a result of reckless, irresponsible, relentless disinformation and outright lies that continue.
Okay, so he just said receive death penalties. So this is what this guy literally just fucking said. That there are people out there, they're putting their lives at risk to help their brothers and to help fellow Americans. And because of disinformation, which we, the government, took seriously, we gave these people death penalties and they're now dead and executed. That's what he just fucking said, right? Those are the words that he just said. That's what the words he used mean. That because of disinformation, they were given death penalties by the government. That's what it means. Death penalties mean the government, right, which is him. So they must have believed the disinformation, and these people working for FEMA out there trying to help people, because we believe the disinformation, we found these people and we executed them, and it's just a horrible thing, right? Or not even that, because that's what you did. And so that's how bad a gaffe is. And he read the thing; it says death threats on it. He's reading a fucking teleprompter. It said death threats, and then he said death penalties. And they received it, which means it's already been executed. Doesn't mean they're on death row and waiting. It means they've been executed. And so that's how bad a gaffe it is. Like his worst gaffe ever. That's the worst gaffe ever, where he said the government's put people to death for trying to help people in the hurricane area because of disinformation. I mean, it's just...
Or relentless disinformation and outright lies that continue to flow. Those who engage in such lies are undermining confidence in the rescue and recovery work that's opening and ongoing. As I speak, they're continuing. These lies are also harmful to those who most need help. Lives are on the line.
That's on the line, bro. They're on the line. Those lies are on the line, bro. They're lying because we're giving them death penalties. And
People are in desperate situations. Have the decency to tell them the truth.
Okay, your truth about death penalties? Because you can't even fucking articulate death threats. The difference between death threats and death penalties is you're saying, oh, these poor people are receiving death threats. No, fuck them. We gave them death penalties. There's a huge difference between those two things you just said. And that's all you had to do was read from the fucking teleprompter, but you can't do your job because they elected a guy who had Parkinson's, who was showing signs of dementia in 2019, probably before that. They knew he wasn't up for the task. He had retired from politics, and they went and got him, and he, ran a campaign of no malarkey, right? Which we'll get into in a bit. Like he was so old that he thought malarkey was relevant when he's trying to cultivate young enthusiasm amongst young people. He proceeded to deteriorate after they rigged the election for him in various ways. They rigged it against Bernie Sanders because Bernie Sanders couldn't beat Trump. And then they did whatever they did with Trump in terms of the, mail-in ballots and all the stuff they did with COVID, and Trump fell for it because he's a dope. And so then they had this guy, and they had a very unlikable vice president that didn't receive one vote because she had to withdraw because the Democrats didn't even like her. The Democrats didn't even like her. And they had this guy who was mentally deteriorating. And at some point, the American people finally, or they released polls where the American people's view over 70%, that's an overwhelming majority, said this guy isn't mentally up to the task. They had a doctor on one of these networks that said he has Parkinson's, and that a first-year medical student, through the symptoms you can see, the way he walks, the gait, the way he turns, he turns his whole body instead of turning his neck, like all the movements and things. That's Parkinson's and not Alzheimer's. Like there's differential diagnosis, and so he has Parkinson's. They've known it, and they concocted a plan where there wouldn't be a primary for him, and there wouldn't be a primary for Kamala. And they waited to the last minute. They rolled him out of debate where he completely fell apart. And then they got rid of him, and they put in Kamala without casting one vote, no primary votes, and the rest of it, right? And this is, that's how bad it is. And now there's these national disasters. They got to roll him out again. And he's clearly just not there. He can't deal with it. And he's going to be asked a question about Trump, and he's going to fall apart even more. And Morning Joe, instead of saying, oh, well, guess what? We got to make sure he, gets to get rid of this guy because he obviously can't do the job. They say he cooks Trump. Like, that's their spin.
So let me say this. To all the people impacted by Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton, despite the misinformation and lies, the truth is we're providing the resources needed to rescue, recover, and rebuild. And rebuild. Let me close with this.
Let me close with this stuff right here.
I know recovery and rebuilding projects can take a long and difficult time. But as long after the press and the cameras move on, I promise you, or you have to pick up the pieces still, I want you to know we'll do everything in our power to help you put pieces back together.
Yeah, because that's what you can do. You see the pieces, like go look at there's people have stuff, like the whole house blows up, right? You can't put the pieces back together. You can rebuild. I mean, the pieces aren't going back together. Like, you could glue a window back together? What the fuck are you talking about, right? Like, it's just a bad way to say it.
And get all that you need. But God bless you, and may God bless our troops and our first responders who are in some cases risking their lives to help. Thank you very much. I'll be reporting it again tomorrow. Thank you.
Mr. President.
So the American people that are there, they just can't do all the work necessary. They can fix the power lines. That takes whatever period of time, right? There's crews going in. You can see like there's crews everywhere on the highways, these, with buckets or trucks driving in, like they said, like people from all over all the way up to Canada are coming in to fix the power lines, right? And so they can do that. And they can restore whatever else, the services that are there. But if there's no money for people to rebuild their houses, what do? And most people, like I said, some are uninsured altogether. Some the insurance isn't going to pay. I mean, because it's flood, the majority of people, it's like a small percentage of them have flood insurance. And it takes whatever amount of time to get your money and then rebuild your house. Because that could be like over a year. Some of these roads that are out there, there's highways out there where they're not able to fix the highway for years, maybe a year. Like that's because it's all these things, these bridges and things that are there. All the places in Asheville, places like that had road devastation. And so all that stuff's going to take whatever it is. And it's the government. Things don't move quickly, right? You can get people water bottles and shit like that, but but mostly like people they have no roads to get to them, right? And so these people are going to suffer, and they're all none of them are going to vote for these guys, I mean, some of them won't be able to vote at all because they won't even get to the polls. But it's just false promises. Because the government can't really fix something like this in a timely fashion. these people are going to have to relocate and change their whole lives. Their jobs are gone. Like there's businesses that are gone. These things. How they're not going to go to work tomorrow or in 3 months, and there's no customers. There's no access points. I mean, there's all these things. It's just total devastation to those communities, right?
On FEMA funding, how much time does Congress have to act before FEMA or the SBA run out of money?
That's in discussion now. I don't want to give you mislead you. I think in terms of
because I usually I mean I'm so clear and concise and not misleading at all.
the SBA, it's pretty right at the edge right now, and I think the Congress should be coming back and moving on the emergency needs immediately, and they're going to have to come back after the election as well, because this is going to be a long haul for total rebuilding. It's going to take several $1 billion. It's not going to be a matter of just a little bit. But we're providing now to make sure people have the emergency relief they need. The dollars just to be able to get a prescription filled, to get a baby formula done. All the things, that's $750.
There's no pharmacy to get it done. What are you talking about? Like, what do you mean? Like baby formula? Like, I mean, like, yeah, sure, but prescriptions? You can't, like, where are you going to get it? You're going to, like, bring pills? You're going to bring these big, like trucks full of medicines and just have a doctor there prescribing shit to people because they can't get access to their prescriptions that were there unless they have them digitally, and maybe they don't even have their cell phone. It's just, like, that's what happens. And I've talked about this before. When the apocalypse happened, when all these people who are on prescription medications that are symptom-based, that are, not curing their disease, that are causing, of course, side effects, but also they are preventing symptoms from happening. And a lot of these people who are on medications that are, for psychological issues. And those people, the ones that have the medication for psychological issues, are going to flip out, right? Like they're going to, you go through withdrawal. Some of these hardcore medications are addictive. And people who, if you don't wean them off them, and so when people run out of their medications, I mean, it's worse than, people starving, maybe they figure a way to eat and whatever. But when they don't have their medications and they don't have their self-medications like, drugs and alcohol and caffeine, you have a whole society going through withdrawal in an apocalyptic situation, right? Like this is what it's going to look like.
That you're talking about? But Mr. Trump and all those other people know it's a lie to suggest that's all they're going to get. That's bizarre.
It's bizarre. It's a lie. Mr. Trump.
Bizarre.
You shouldn't have brought Trump up because this is where you get screwed.
It's bizarre. They got to stop this. They're being so damn un-American with the way they're talking about this.
It's all damn American. It's un-American to express doubt in your government, doubt in a guy who's senile and the people that run him and FEMA. Again, some of it is disinformation, right? Some of it is lies. But, to express these things is not un-American, right? You're supposed to question your government. You're supposed to question your media and the official story. That's what the First Amendment's all about. That's not un-American. The First Amendment is the first fucking amendment, which means it's the most American thing. The freedom of press, the freedom to express yourself, right? Because the government wouldn't punish you for saying things that were critical to the government, right?
Stuff. But there's going to be a need for significant amounts of money. We're already underway of trying to calculate what the costs will be because we don't want to mislead anybody. We want to make sure all the costs are able to be covered.
Have you spoken to Speaker Johnson about coming back before the election to vote?
No, I haven't.
Mr. President, so are you calling on Congress to
See the way he turns his head? That's Parkinson's right there. That's a symptom.
come back early?
I think Congress should move as rapidly as they can, particularly on the most immediate need, which is small business.
But are you the Vice President said yesterday that FEMA has what it needs. There's enough resources. The Congress does not need to come back, right?
FEMA has its needs. That's different than SBA.
Okay, so it's SBA. They need to come back and do SBA.
Yeah, but they're going to need a lot more.
Mr. President, what did Prime Minister Netanyahu tell you about his plans relating to retaliation?
He's coming over to help with a storm.
Mr. President.
Look at that's supposed to be like sarcasm, but he's irritated, right? He had trouble reading, and now he's getting irritated. They're going to ask him about Trump. He's going to snap because he doesn't have it in him anymore. He's angry and he's confused, right? Now Netanyahu they just bombed the shit out of whatever, Lebanon. And I'm not going to cover that here. I'll cover that maybe today's Saturday, October 12th. And so, I mean, whatever, that's going on. And so, like, he's getting annoyed because he's just coming here for this. And they said don't answer questions or answer a few and get out because they knew he was not up to the job, right? Okay, so here's the big moment here.
Have you spoken before President Trump at all?
Are you kidding me? Mr. President Trump, former President Trump, get a life, man. Help these people.
Will you hold him accountable?
Okay, so here's the quick creeper mullet. See the way he turned? So the guy who was a Parkinson's expert said, he explained it through, medical jargon that I can't, and I'll show you that video at some point again, maybe, if it's still up. But, it's in one of my older videos. But this guy said, a first-year medical student, let's just show you that turn again here. And I'll show you that whole thing. We'll go through it.
Help these people.
Will you hold him accountable? You said
See how he turns his whole body instead of just, the way he turned his body, there's a motor breakdown, there's in terms of their balance, in terms of how they move, how people move when they have Parkinson's. And that's an indication. The way he doesn't turn his head, he turns his whole body, and the way he walks, and the way, the baby steps he takes, all the things, the inability to get up on the plane. So the guy's had Parkinson's for a while. And so that whole thing, right? So they just asked if you talk to Trump, because Trump's running for president, and he gets pissed, right? Like, why would I do that? Like, well, because he's running for president, and he might be president, and,
Vice President said yesterday that FEMA.
Different than SBA.
Okay, so it's SBA. They need to come back and do SBA.
Yeah, but they're going to need a lot more.
Mr. President, what did Prime Minister Netanyahu tell you about his plans relating to retaliation?
Right here, let's move here.
Are you kidding me?
No, let's go back a little bit here. Here we go.
Have you spoken before President Trump at all?
Are you kidding me?
No, he's asking you a question. He's a journalist. What do you think? He's joking? He's ribbing you? It's about, people are suffering right now. Are you kidding me? Like, he gets pissed, right? With the fake laugh. Like the weird fake laugh.
Mr. President Trump, former President Trump, get a life, man. Help these people.
Get a life, man. And they say it here. Are you kidding me? Biden cooks Trump, get a life. And so this is what Morning Joe decided to go with, right? Like, get a life? What is this, a frickin' 80s sitcom? This is an 80s sitcom. That's not a burn. Something from Get a Life was something that when I was a little kid, they used to say on sitcoms, 70s, 80s sitcoms, right? And it wasn't funny then. Get a life, man. That's not fun. Burn. Get a life, man. Burn. Like, that's, get a life. You should get a life. Well, the guy was president, and he's running for president again, and he was a fake billionaire, and he was, celebrity on a variety of shows. He had his own show, successful franchise of The Apprentice and things. So what do you mean get a life? Like, compared to what? Get a life, man. Get a life. Why don't you stop running for president and do some, like something, be successful. Now, Trump's success is made up and manufactured, but that's for people who doesn't believe in the official story, right? In terms of, his life, you would think he's fairly successful. And so the idea that you'd be doing something stupid, get a life, man. Like Mo Malarkey, he said this no malarkey shit. My mom, who would be like 120 now, I think, if she was alive, something like that, so 110, 115, something. And she's much older than him. And they didn't use the term malarkey, right? It's like some black and white movie from the 70s or 60s. Oh, they're full of malarkey, the way they used to talk, right? Like they talk in a different way, the dance in, doing the jitterbug and shit. Like that's what that era. He ran the No Malarkey tour. He didn't cook Trump. He just showed that he's like regressed. Get a life, burn. Don't come back. Don't mess with me. And then it gets weird here.
People.
Will you hold him accountable? You said you were going to hold those accountable.
Public will hold them accountable. You better than the press hold them accountable because you know the truth.
Okay, so she just said, if you put out disinformation, we're going to hold you accountable. There are people getting death penalties because of it, right? So that's Trump. He's talking about Trump here, his mullet, the way he walks off. And he says, you hold him accountable, but you just said you would, right? Which means that you was a bullshit threat because you can't hold Trump accountable because he's putting out disinformation, right? And that they should be holding him accountable. Like in how mad he got, right? He gets mad at her. You hold him accountable. I don't get any power. I don't, I come out here. I don't even know. I just pooped my diaper. I don't know. It's like, leave me alone, right? Leave me alone.
Speak with former President Trump?
No.
What'd she say?
Accountable.
Public will hold them accountable. You better than the press hold them accountable because you know the truth.
Will you plan to speak with former President Trump?
No.
I'm not sure what she said there. Let me just put this on. But I think she was saying...
Accountable. You better than the press hold them accountable because you know the truth.
Will you plan to speak with former President Trump?
No.
No. I thought she said hold him accountable. So that was bad. Like the limited room of people so he wouldn't get overwhelmed. They wouldn't be shouting at him. And they, you know, I mean, bare basic, like probably, there was probably like 5 or 10 press people in there. And they wouldn't like, you know how they all yell at once and he gets confused? Like he's not up to the job. This is a bad day for him, right? His worst gaffe ever, where he confuses death threats with death penalties, two different things. And then that last part about Trump. And MSNBC is trying to claim they burned him. He burned, like, this is spectacular.
So I saw you online trying to win this falconry day contest with RFK Jr. and Don Jr.
Well, listen to me. I do so much stupid stuff, and I don't know too much about that stuff. And I live in New York also.
So speaking about things that were considered funny in the 70s or 80s, this is comedian George Wallace, right? When I said that, when Biden said, get a life, man, that was something that was on 70s and 80s sitcoms. And that was when George Wallace was considered funny. He's wearing a hat that says, I be thinking, which, definitely is something I approve of. That's great. But he's being asked by the gumball guy. This is the guy who counted Trump's lies and gumballs. He's my favorite CNN guy, CNN person. He now has his own show on whatever it's called, CNN. I mean, the Saturday morning CNN. Today's Saturday, October 12th. This video won't be out till, I believe, Monday. And so, there's this wonderful exchange. But when he talks about what Kamala Harris did to Joe Biden here at the debate, it is wonderful.
About this hunting and all of that, I'm not into it. Don't know too much about it, to be honest with you.
You watched the debates?
Oh, you kidding?
What'd you think?
Oh, I thought she ate his butt up.
Now it's a party. How did that taste, Kamala? How did Trump's ass taste? I mean, he's, this is another guy who's too old to be on TV. He did this thing with Comedians for Kamala or something. That's why he's being featured here. Wonderful.
She ate his butt. You talking about the two? Yeah. Oh, she was so wonderful. I love that lady. She's so good. She's so smart. How does he call her? She's not qualified. He's not qualified. He's a liar. He's a thief. He's a racist. I mean, I'm mad about this. I'm sorry, America, that I'm mad about it, but I'm just caught up in it.
A serious question here, and you talked about this at the top, black men. We heard what former President Obama said to black men.
Yeah.
Are you concerned, though, because the polls show that for as much as we can trust polls, we know what they've shown us in the past.
So, people say this in the truth community. Trump says the same thing. Now, no one trusts polls anymore. So we've gotten to a point where they're saying, polling is a science. And there is some level where people are embarrassed to tell the truth. Like they'll say in public, no, I don't like Donald Trump, but in private would vote for him. Like that's what happened in 2016. They didn't want to admit it on TV or to pollers. So there's things like that. There's small margin of error. But if polling's done correctly, it is fairly accurate. Of course, things might change in a week's time or whatever, right? But polls should be accurate. And the best polls are the post-election data that they collect, right? And those polls would indicate that there has been no cheating in the election. And that's what you need. When you interview people who are leaving just voted, they will tell you who they voted for. And that that's very accurate and needs to be accurate because, there's cheating without it. So when when the gumball guy is calling out polls and say you can't trust the polls, right? And, when Trump calls out the polls, that means no one's believing in the polls. Truthers don't believe in the polls. The liberal media doesn't believe in the polls. Nobody does, right? Which, that's a bad thing because polls, if they're done scientifically and they're done with the, professionally, then they're, fairly accurate, right? It's not the polls that are the problem. It's the people that are manipulating them that are the problem. Also, I'm going to cover the Obama speech a little bit, too. I didn't know he said this stuff. I want to find that spot where he's addressing black men because we're going to show you this thing. Black men don't like Kamala Harris, like as a demographic. And I know why, and you know why. We'll get back to that in a moment here.
That her numbers are soft with black men.
Are you saying that Kamala Harris, gumball guy, are you saying Kamala Harris makes black men soft? Are you saying she's a boner shrinker? I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
That's what you think. You wait until November 6th. You're going to see the black men are going to change. The black men are going to be there. We're going to be, all you Waka Flockas out there, you are going to vote. I'm your daddy. I'm your real daddy too, by the way.
Are you saying his mother cheated on his father with you and you impregnate you that you just said this, you're his real daddy, which, is kind of insulting to a lot of people. And, George Wallace this stuff isn't funny anymore. It wasn't funny back when he did it, but it was funnier.
Listen, we will be there. The men will be there. You'll see Detroit, especially here in Atlanta. I did this show here in Atlanta last night. I think we had 50. It's usually more ladies than men. Yeah. But my men were there. The number one owner of Popeyes was there representing me.
The number one owner of Popeyes. So this guy did a comedy show. And the comedians were probably mostly or all black. And the audience, like he's doing this in Atlanta, right? So they're trying to get as many black people in Atlanta to vote so she can win Georgia. That means that she's not resonating with the black community because this happened before. When she ran in the primary, her and Cory Booker, they were laughing because Joe Biden was senile. And he said that he had the support of the black community, and they were shaking their heads going, how? Like they knew it was true, but they couldn't believe it. You had two African-American, at least that's what they're billed as. Cory Booker certainly is. And Kamala Harris says she's, African-American, right? I mean, she's Jamaican. But they're running against this old white guy who has more support in the black community than they do. That's one of the reasons they ran Joe Biden, because Hillary Clinton couldn't win over the black community. And so they were shaking their heads. You see it in the debate. I showed you the clip over and over again. And so, this is a problem she had before, and she has it now. If she can't get the people of color to vote for her, then what's going to happen? How is she going to possibly win? She's got to, she can't lose ground that Biden had. And so, especially in these swing states. And Georgia's one of them. And so that's why this guy has to go out and campaign, and Obama's campaigning, because she's not getting it done, right? And it should be a foregone conclusion. Now, and it's with men. We'll get into this, why men. I'll show you the picture again.
Former mayor of Atlanta was there. Congresswoman
Nikki Williams was there.
Yeah, she was there. Jennifer Holliday was there.
Okay, so that guy just talked about all the black women that were there, right? He said that black women made up more than 50% of the audience, and these were people who wanted to go see a comedy show. They might not even vote. You're trying to get these people to vote, right? But here's the picture, and men can respond in the comment section, right? When you see a woman looking at you like this, regardless of your race, regardless of your upbringing or demographics, unless you're one of those guys who likes to get tied up and beaten by a woman and have her pour hot wax on your nipples or some shit, if you're not some sadomasochistic person who wants to be browbeaten, like you want to be henpecked, and there are some men but want to be cocked, they want to be henpecked, sure. But, everyone else, just normal men, when you get this look from the woman in your life, you're not happy about it, right? And maybe you've deserved it, you feel all right, it's, if it's warranted. But this disdain look, this condescending look, she did this throughout the debate. And it didn't register with men. Men hate this. Like, they don't, men don't want any part of that, right? And like, there's no way you can say she won the debate because she doesn't have any men on her campaign. And her husband probably, likes this look. And he likes her laugh, remember? He says, I love her laugh, fully acknowledging everyone else doesn't, that they've made her stop doing her laugh. I love her laugh, Yeah, sure you do. You'd have to. But you probably love this look too, Dougie Fresh, right? And so, like, this look is horrible. And she did it throughout the debate. And so men are off-put by her. And, she couldn't connect with men before, and they don't like her, just based on all these other aspects of her personality. Men are going to be turned off by that laugh, right? Oh, that's like a crazy person laugh. And so you're talking to her. Gwen Walsh, that's her name. We'll get into Gwen in a bit, too. Gwen's another one. And so this look and that crazy laugh, it's the same problem Hillary Clinton have. Like, the way that she was, and the nagging and the voice and all these things. It's just like I said, it's a boner shrinker, right? It's just like, oh my God, turn that thing off, right? It sucks the testosterone out of you as a man. Nobody wants to hear that nagging, stuff. And so Kamala Harris came across as a nagger, and also this look was the worst. And so that's why she's not resonating with men, and black men in particular. And, there's a sincerity gap here, right? She's not authentic. And people in the black community know that, right? I mean, if they're not totally indoctrinated into the whole Democratic theme, they know that she's not sincere. She's not a real one, right? And so that's why she's going to lose this election, amongst other reasons. And again, I'm not psyched about it because I told you what a piece of shit I think Donald Trump is. And I think it's going to be a disaster. And I think they're electing Donald Trump to be the patsy. So that means bad shit's going to go down. And it's already started. Okay. So let's get into this President Obama speech. Well, let's start here with the beginning. It's in Pennsylvania.
Hello, Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh.
Are you fired up? Are you ready to go?
They're ready to go.
It is good. It is good to be back in Pennsylvania.
Okay, other than this thing you're doing for Kamala Harris, when's the next time you're going to go back to Pittsburgh? Right? Explain what reason you would have to go back to Pittsburgh, why you would go, and when you're going to go.
It is good to be back in Pittsburgh.
Really? Okay, so well, let's go through these other things he says.
I love Pittsburgh.
He loves it. He just loves it. Woo! Woo! He loves Pittsburgh. I live in Pittsburgh, and he loves it. Woo! Woo!
I love the people of Pittsburgh.
Woo! I'm a person. I'm in Pittsburgh. Woo!
I love the food in Pittsburgh.
Woo! I eat food in Pittsburgh.
I
Woo!
don't usually do this, but this is a little bit of a Yelp rating. Just had some of Pamela's pancakes.
Woo! I heard of that place, Pamela. Woo! She has pancakes there. Woo! In Pittsburgh. Pamela's pancakes in Pittsburgh. Woo!
Those like 10, 15 years ago when I was running.
Woo! Pamela's dead. Woo! He doesn't know that Pamela's dead. Woo!
And I was all like, I need some of those pancakes this time out. And
Pamela died 3 years ago. Woo!
And even though I'm from Chicago, some of you may know, when I was a kid, I was a Steelers fan.
Woo! Woo! We like the Steelers. Woo! Woo! We like the same football team. Woo!
Watching the Steelers this season, it seems I'm not the only guy from Chicago who likes being in Pittsburgh. Because so far, Justin Fields is doing pretty good.
Woo!
Now,
okay, so, this pandering to where people live, right? Rock stars do it. People are just passing through a city. I've never had this. Like, I don't even understand it as a identification. Now, I love parts of America. I mean, most of America, the land itself, right? In the sense that I'm like, wow, this is an amazing country. And, I've been to other places too that, India and Virgin Islands, and there's beautiful places everywhere. And there's places that just like places you go on vacation, or nice places, or natural forests, and just beautiful parts of the land that's been created, divinity, like by the divine forces. There's wonderful locations, right? And I never once thought of like, woo, I like that place. Like it just doesn't matter. Like any place I lived, if you said, hey, that's a great city, I would, yeah, because I live there. That's what you're saying. That because you live there with these people, that when somebody compliments your city, people come up to me and say, your dogs are really cute. Okay, yeah, I made them cute. It's me. I created this breed of dog. Their cuteness is 100%. Like I'm supposed to thank them for that, right? Like it has something to do with me. Like my dogs being cute has zero to do with me, right? Well, those are really nice, cute dogs. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're right. They are. Why are you telling me that, right? I know. I have them. Like it's not a compliment. I'm not. My dog's cuteness has zero to do with me, right? The city's great. Okay, yeah, thank you. Oh, woo, yeah, woo. I don't know why I would identify with that. You live in a place, and I live in. I've liked most of the places I live, and there's always good things about it. But you have a wonderful house. Okay, great. You have, I'm the architect, right? I mean, none of these things mean anything. Like they're not like compliments, right? You're lucky. I'm fortunate to live in a beautiful country. I'm fortunate to live in a nice place. I'm fortunate to have cute dogs, right? I'm grateful for these things, but it's just, it's good fortune that you live in a place that you like, right? But people like live in a city and they live in some shitty part of the city. Like there's people who live in the worst parts of some crappy city, some horrible place, like Rand University, where and Randy Moss came from. Rand Incorporated it's a non-incorporated town with no city government. Just these horrible places that people live. There's depressing, horrible, dirty, just like toxic. That movie Dark Water, where their company was making Teflon and people and cows were dying. Polluted places. Like just we drove in when I went to India in 2012, and I hadn't been to New York in years. And we were driving in at night. We were leaving the flight left at like 1 o'clock in the morning. So we're driving my family, and it looked like Mordor. And there was these giant potholes, and the place was just run down. We were going over some bridge, and I'm like, oh my God, this is like horrible. This place like a post-apocalyptic city. Where we were driving in from New Jersey, we stayed some practitioner of the system with some guy, some rich guy. He's got a couple of patents, and he lives in a nice place in New Jersey outside of New York. Nice house. We were staying in his basement. We drove there and slept there in the guy's house for, we got there maybe a day early, and, guys generously letting people stay there. Indians are known for being like generous, and this kind of thing used to happen in the system before it got corrupted. So my family stayed in a nice place in New Jersey. There's an ashram there. We were there maybe a couple of days, close to Princeton. I had a friend whose dad worked at Princeton, and he was getting married, and somehow I ended up down there with him. Like I don't know how that worked out. I think I was, I babysitted his kid when they were getting married. He was married a girl, had a single mom, and they used to live in a house that I lived in, so they were familiar with me, and they asked me to take care of the kid while they were getting married, right? Or while they went on their honeymoon or something for a couple of days. And so I ended up in Princeton. I'm like, oh, it's a beautiful place in New Jersey, right? My wife and I were talking about New Jersey license plates. We saw one the other day. And they're the worst license plate for something that's called the Garden State, but there's beautiful places. But then there's these horrible cities, right? These god-awful cities. And people live there in these horrible places. And then when somebody talks about their city, they get offended. They live in like just a dump. And you talk about their city and they want to fight you, right? Like it has anything to do with them. And you live in a worse, like it isn't even a good part of the city. It isn't like the good, nice, I mean, there's no reason you should identify with your city. Like it means, like it's something to do with you. You just happen to be there. You're just lucky enough to be American or unlucky enough to be American or whatever you want to look at it. You're unlucky enough to live in Pittsburgh or you're lucky or you like it there, great. It doesn't mean like it means it's nothing to do with you, right? This praise, this like goofy praise that people heap on these dummies who think it's important. Oh my God, he likes Pittsburgh. He really likes it. He ate at Polly's Pancakes, at Pamela's Pancakes. It's just, and you know what? He used to be a Steelers fan. This guy, I mean, I'm going to vote for him. He knows about the place I live. He knows a couple of things about it and likes it. He actually likes the pancakes in Pittsburgh at Pamela's. This guy likes Pamela's Pancakes at Pittsburgh, and I gotta vote for the person he's telling me to vote for, Kamala Harris, because like I live in Pittsburgh and I like Pamela's Pancakes, so I better vote for him.
Before we get started, we have a little bit of work to do here. All right, so I want everybody to be, just settle in. We got some work to do. Before we get started.
Holy shit, this is my day off. I didn't know I was going to do. What were you going to have me move shit? Like, what am I? What kind of work are you expecting out of me? I thought this was going to be like a fun thing. It's.
I did want to say that we are, heartbroken about the loss of life.
Okay, so that's work to say it's heartbroken because somebody else had a hurricane, and you're actually your heart's broken because people died and lost their houses. Your heart's breaking. You're such a compassionate person that you feel he's got kind of small hands too. Probably bigger than Trump's, but.
In Florida, North Carolina, states across.
Which breaks your heart more? It's this North Carolina or Florida? Because North Carolina is still a swing state, and Florida's already going to Trump. So which one do you think is going to bother you more? Like where do you think you're? Like what hurts your heart more? Loss of life in Florida or how about in Israel and Palestine? Does that break your heart? Like 20,000 kids in Palestine or any number of places around the world. What places break your heart the most that people have died? All the people have died outside of those states, right?
North Carolina, states across the Southwest, we are thinking about people, families whose lives have been upended by the storms over the
like
last...
a smattering of golf applause, right? Not like the kind of applause when you say you like the Steelers, but a little golf clap.
Couple weeks. I could not be more grateful.
Grateful what?
For the first responders.
First responders, yes, those guys who was given a death sentence, some of them.
And FEMA professionals.
Exactly, they were given a death sentence. I mean, my former vice president, Joe Biden, just said they were given a death sentence. I mean, some of them are dead because of conspiracy theories and disinformation that was put out there on the internet. And now they're dead because of their hard work and because of people lying about like Trump, even though they're not going to get punished, Trump and the rest of them. They were given these death sentences, right?
Put themselves in harm's way to try and help.
Exactly. Death sentence, because they put their harm's way of conspiracy theories that are out there about the government.
It's time.
A smattering of applause. Again, not as big as the Steelers.
Times like this when you realize having honest, competent leadership in government really matters.
Yeah, like, this guy that was my vice president and was known for gaffes and saying stupid shit. And I gave him a BFF bracelet a long time ago. He did that. He actually did that. And now, I chased him out of office. We pushed Kamala Harris on him. We all bailed on him because he's mentally incompetent. He has Parkinson's. And so which I knew years ago when I told him not to run. And I backed Hillary Clinton because he was, he wasn't as good as Hillary Clinton. So even though he was my vice president, I picked her over him because I knew he was mentally incompetent. I told him he should retire because, he was walking into walls and shit. And now we pushed him out of office and saying, don't run again. Like, you told him not to run again because you got Parkinson's and you got you're breaking down mentally. That guy, yeah, that guy who can't make a distinction between death threats and death sentences, right? They can't make a distinction between somebody giving you a death threat or the government executing you, giving you a death sentence. He doesn't know the difference. He's mentally competent. Kamala Harris, who has no experience in whatsoever, but she, was really good at getting on her knees and servicing some guy that was 30 years older than her, twice as old as her, 5 years older than her mom, and servicing the guy so he gave her a career. I don't know if that helps when there's a hurricane or not, But, you know, like these are mentally competent people that are better than Trump somehow. You should, not that I'm a Trump person, but come on, right? Like, let's not pretend there's any difference here. Woo!
It makes a difference.
It does. Makes a difference. Her knee pads and his insanity.
And today I'm asking you to vote for some of those leaders, including some folks we need working with your outstanding governor, who you just heard from, Governor Josh Shapiro. We need.
So you mean Genocide Josh, who was going to be vice presidential pick for Kamala Harris? He was going to be your vice presidential pick, but then he was too gung-ho about Israel, so they called him Genocide Josh. He was the guy, you know, he talks like Obama. He's got an Obama accent, even though he's from Pennsylvania, and he's Jewish. Like, he's, you know, he's got this sort of Obama swagger kind of thing that he does.
Them in Harrisburg.
Woo!
So we need you to vote for your next Auditor General, Malcolm Kenyatta.
Malcolm
Your
Kenyatta.
next Attorney General,
Woo!
Eugene DePascale.
Pascali, he's the best. Woo!
Your next State Treasurer, Eric McClellan.
I knew he was great.
My buddy, your outstanding United States Senator Bob Casey.
Boom, Bob Casey, who likes him, Fetterman. Woo! These guys are great. They all like Pamela's pancakes in Pittsburgh.
Now here in Pennsylvania, there are 3 ways to vote. You can vote early.
You can die and have someone vote for you. Okay, so I had to redo this thing. I forgot to turn the audio on, so I knew that joke was coming. It's a little smoother when I do it the second time, but not as spontaneous. But, you know, this thing happened in Pennsylvania. So, you know, I'm not a Trump person, and I'm not Trump lost the election, you know, it was rigged against him, all these things. Trump fucked himself by showing no spine and allowing them to push the closing of the economy down because of COVID, and then Operation Warp Speed and all the other things. And because Trump got worked on COVID, that he didn't stand up to them, he allowed them to push him into whether he went along with it willingly or he was bribed or threatened or he just, you know, they worked him on it. Whatever reason, it allowed a senile Joe Biden, a guy with dementia, Parkinson's, with cognitive difficulties, not to campaign, which screwed him. You know, if Biden had to campaign, he would have lost that election. And so that's why he was able to win, because, you know, one of the ingredients. Then the other one was mail-in ballots, which we know, which were very suspect. And so many voted before the second debate. They voted before they heard about Hunter Biden, all these things. Again, that allowed him to win. And Pennsylvania, they didn't know what the fuck they were doing with mail-in ballots. And they had more mail-in ballots than anybody, any other state, you know, per capita. And they were the state that cost Trump more than any other state. And they, you know, they had all those mail-in ballots, you know, coming in, and they didn't know even how they were going to do the mail-in ballots a month ahead of time. And so you're telling me it was flawless? That's ridiculous. And I want Trump to lose more than I want Kamala to lose because of all the things I've said about Trump and the WWE thing. Not that I'm rooting for Kamala, not that I'll be happy either way, because, you know, and not that it's going to matter either way either. But he got completely worked on the mail-in ballots, and, you know, Obama's putting that thing here. Let me go find the 2 other parts, because he's going to talk about Trump a little bit here, and then he's going to talk to black voters, man voters. And why is he doing that? Well, we'll get to that in a second here. Okay, so we're 5 minutes into this video. I know he talks about Trump. Let's see what he does here.
Because there are a lot of Americans who are still struggling out there. They're still striving to make life better for themselves, for their families, and for their kids. And let's face it, as a country, we've been through a lot.
Been through a lot of stuff. It's been tough times in America. We've been kicked around.
These last few years.
Last few years under Joe Biden.
We had a historic pandemic.
Exactly. You know, that was tough. Real tough. And it wasn't as tough as they said it was going to be, and it kind of, you know, all the other things that went along with it.
Wreaking havoc.
Havoc
in
awoke.
business.
Boom. It was horrible.
Disruptions from the pandemic then caused prices to spike.
Exactly. Like, the economy went down, and then we blamed Trump for that, not the pandemic, like we're doing now.
A strain on family budgets. And in many ways, it's felt like the aspirations of working people have taken a back seat to the priorities of the rich and the powerful.
Boom, rich and powerful. What's this about? So he hasn't talked about Kamala at all. Now he's going to segue into Trump. Now, Trump, it's his fault more than anybody else that he got worked on the economy. He was the president, and he got worked on COVID. And he had a false economy because he deregulated everything. But there was an economic boom because he allowed the banksters to go back to their old ways, right? So that was his fault. But the economy was doing well. And then there was COVID, and it didn't do well. And then they campaigned on that economy. That was another way that Trump screwed himself, because Biden said it was Trump's fault that the economy sucked, even though they pressured him and he got worked into closing it, which is on Trump because he didn't show his spine, right? But this guy isn't praising Kamala Harris because he's got nothing to say about her. He talked about how much he loved Pittsburgh. He talked about the things you already saw. And now he's talking about this, right? Trump.
So I get it, why people are looking to shake things up. I mean, I am the hopey changey guy. So
I am the hopey changey guy. Remember that guy?
So I understand.
I ran as that guy that Trump's running as now, is what he's saying.
People feeling frustrated and feeling we can do better
Than Joe Biden.
What I cannot understand is why anybody
He just took a giant crap on Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's presidency.
would think that Donald Trump will shake things up in a way that is good for you, Pennsylvania. I don't understand that.
I don't understand that. I don't. I just don't get it. So he has nothing to say good about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. He doesn't say anything about how great they did. He's now just getting into Trump. And apparently it goes on for a while. We're going to watch a little bit of it.
Because there is absolutely no evidence that this man thinks about anybody but himself.
Okay, so what is your evidence that Kamala Harris... I would agree with that. I 100% agree with Obama. You're right, Obama. Show me the evidence that Kamala Harris thinks about anybody but herself. Show me one bit of evidence that she's anything but a person, a political climber, somebody who's selfish. She's not there for other people. Complete phony. They have to hide her personality. That she's just got anything selfless about her. Like, show me any evidence any of these people do. Joe Biden, yourself. Show me one politician that thinks about other people, puts other people before them. That politician's unelectable, by the way, right? Because you guys have all had to make deals with the devil to be in front of the fucking microphone in the first place. So, that's true about Trump. But it's also true about Kamala, right? Like, it's true about you and everyone else. Woo!
I've said it before.
I'll say it again.
Donald Trump is a 78-year-old billionaire who has not stopped whining about his problems since he rode down his golden escalator 9 years ago.
Was it really golden?
You've got the...
First of all, he's not really a billionaire. I mean, maybe now he is because he monetized his presidency. But like, you guys run Trump down about him not being successful, which is true. He's a piece of shit who sponged off his dad and was a flim-flam man and went bankrupt 6 times. But you guys, you're just calling him a billionaire now because it suits you so that you reflect on how he's different than all these hard-working Pennsylvanians that live in Pittsburgh and eat as Pamela's pancakes.
The tweet in all caps, the ranting and the raving about crazy conspiracy theories.
Boom. Crazy conspiracy theories.
Yeah, the 2-hour speeches, word salad, just, it's like...
Wait, I can understand everything Trump's saying. I agree with almost none of it, but I understand what he's saying. It's not word salad. You're saying word salad to a guy. We just saw Obama, we saw Biden fuck up the comparison between death threats and a death sentence, right? Like, what are you talking about, bro?
Fidel Castro, just on and on. Constant attempts to sell you stuff. Who does that? Selling
every politician. You're all salespeople. What are you fucking talking about? Like, you're trying to sell them that you like the Pittsburgh pancakes. You haven't had them in 15 years. So he just said he loves Pittsburgh, right? He came to Pittsburgh 15 years ago. So that's 2010. 2009, whatever it was, right? 2011. I mean, somewhere in that time, probably 2011. Is that right? Well, whatever. 15 years ago. So, yeah, 2009. I just woke up from a nap. So, 2009, he came to Pennsylvania, and he had these pancakes. He was president until 2016. He didn't come back for 5 years. And it's the entire time not being president, even when he's been hawking his own stuff and pitching and selling his own bullshit, he hasn't come back to Pittsburgh. And so he could have had Pamela's pancakes any time during that time, but he didn't do that. And so, like, what are you selling? You're trying to sell us that you had to have Pamela's pancakes, so much so that you came back 15 years later, oh, yeah, because you're campaigning for some woman you barely know and who has no record to run on. So all you can talk about, Donald Trump's the same old bullshit. Are you going to talk about his small hands, which is really you talking about his dick? You guys love to talk about the guy's Johnson, right? Like Jimmy Kimmel's and Bill Clinton did the same thing. Like you did it at the convention. It's weird, your obsession with Donald Trump's manhood.
Gold sneakers and $100,000 watch and most recently a Trump Bible.
That's pretty funny. It actually is fucked up. They try to sell Bible. Woo.
He wants you to buy the Word of God, Donald Trump edition.
Is it a Word of God? Because we think you're a Muslim, but it isn't the Word of God. The Bible is not the Word of God, right? The Bible was written by men. And so it can't be the Word of God because there's no Word of God that's written by men. There's no Word of God. God is more of a feeling in terms of God being love, right?
His name right there next to Matthew and Luke. I mean,
he's just so funny.
A couple years ago, Donald Trump was told that Mike Pence was in the Capitol about 40 feet.
Okay, so he's talked about Trump for 4 minutes now, right? And I've jumped forward here. Let's go a little bit further. Woo!
This is a leader who has spent her life fighting on behalf of people who need a voice and a change.
So it takes him 10 minutes to get to Kamala. Like, why would he talk about Trump first and then Kamala second? And so, I mean, just think about that. Because he has nothing to say, right? You would lead with her if she was the selling point, but it's never been about her or Biden or anybody. It's always about, well, don't vote for Trump. How can you vote for Trump? Why in the world would you vote for Trump? Like, that's their message. That's always been their message. When I talk about this idiot who left me this comment, remember that they have used Trump. Their biggest selling point is to be opposite of Trump. Their whole platform is anti-Trump, which you can see now, because I'm going to talk about that later. Let's find the part where he talks to black guys about why they should vote for Kamala. Okay. So let's get to this thing with Obama. This was before the speech.
Barack Obama is back on the campaign trail and he's making the case against Donald Trump. But before his guest feature in Pennsylvania, Obama made a surprise visit to Kamala Harris's campaign headquarters in Pittsburgh. It was there that
Pittsburgh. Did he go to Pamela's Pancakes first, though? I thought he went to the pancake place first. Now you're telling me something different.
He got candid, maybe a little too candid if you are in the vice president's inner circle tonight. He warned that Harris is underperforming him with black voters, and he had a message specifically for black men.
Why is that? Why did he have that?
Part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. And you're coming up with other...
Okay, so that's what you think it is, right? It's all about her being a woman? Or that she's not somebody you think is authentic, right?
alternatives and other reasons for that. And so now you're thinking about sitting out or even supporting somebody who has a history of denigrating you?
That's crazy nuts. Or when, there's a black woman I showed you who was locked up and her daughter had, was it sickle cell anemia, some kind of painful disease. And her daughter missed a lot of school. And the mom was at her wit's end, like a single mom. And Kamala Harris made that rule about truancy and locked this woman up. And this woman, gave us, again, as far as I know, this was legitimate. I saw you the video. And she had other policies where she was locking up black people for marijuana smoking and stuff in San Francisco. I have a whole thing to get to on San Francisco where the people are letting coyotes. The coyotes just don't even acknowledge human beings as a threat and walk up and eat their little dogs at this park, right? Like that's Kamala Harris's hometown, basically.
Because you think that's a sign of strength? Because that's what being a man is? Putting women down?
Wow, look at him getting deep.
That's not acceptable.
CNN political commentator Errol Lewis is in our fifth seat for this conversation. Errol, I guess he knew the cameras were there. It was an unscheduled stop, but that message was so pointed. In addition to him making it very clear, Kamala Harris is not doing what she needs to do with this core Democratic constituency.
That's right. Although he is asking her, let's be clear, to go over a very high hurdle. Barack Obama got historic levels of black voter registration and turnout and support, and he did it twice. It was almost inevitable that it was going to swing more toward the long-term average of a handful of black voters supporting.
Okay, so why is that? Like, why don't you address that? Because that has nothing to do with Trump. And Trump is getting more black vote than any other Republican. Like, there was a lot more supportive after Biden. And Biden, I think, has got more black vote than, especially among men, than Kamala Harris. And they know that, or they wouldn't be saying this, right? It was the same problem Hillary Clinton had with men in general and black people specifically. And that's why she lost the election. So they brought in Biden, who was a part of the Obama coalition, and he was, known to be linked to Obama. And so he didn't get his, historical numbers like Obama, but he got more than Kamala Harris. So think about why she isn't, right? Do they not think that she's legitimate? She doesn't have street cred. They don't think she's sincere. She thinks she's fake. I got this thing to show what Dougie Fresh and her are shoveling. We'll show that in a bit. But why is that? Like, why is she underperforming? And if she does, she can't win. They're saying she has no chance of winning because that's a demographic she has to have. Indians are voting. I bet every East Indian will vote for her, regardless of her not being 100% Indian. I mean, I will see if she'll get record numbers of Indians, and she's not even really campaigning for them, their vote. But just the fact her name's Kamala, if she comes from India, and again, Indians are prejudiced against each other in India. There's all these different castes and these different regions, and they're quite different. They speak different languages, multiple different languages. There's something like, I think, 60 major languages and hundreds of minor languages. There's languages that only like 90,000 people speak in the whole country. And based in the state, their culture and their food is quite different. And yet the Indians in America that are not all from South India, from Tamil, from where she's from, her mom, will vote for her. But why not African Americans? So this is very telling. Maybe because she's unfucking likable and really difficult for men to like. I mean, she should really be hard for women to like either. Like, this is just, she's a bad candidate. She's not a good person, a likable person, right? Trump, as shitty as he is, to some people, he's likable. He's definitely more likable than, remember when Obama said that Hillary Clinton was likable enough? And he was, people thought it was like kind of mocking her, which he kind of was, when he was running against Hillary Clinton. Likability is just not there for Kamala Harris. Okay, so I had a bunch of stuff I want to get to about Gwen Walls, but I'm not going to do that today because I only had one thing and now I have more. And I want to. She's just so spectacular. I want to put her in the beginning of it, towards the beginning of a video, the next video. And so there are a few Kamala Harris things to get to here. This is Kamala Harris achievements, the achievements of Kamala Harris. It's a blank book basically. And they're selling it in some major bookstores. That's really hilarious. So this is Kamala Harris with Dougie Fresh, and they don't know how to use shovels, right? they're supposedly planting a tree at their house just as photo op. I mean, that's not the kind of clothes you wear when you're doing something like this. And they don't know what they're doing. They've never done this before. And they're not holding the shovels. And it's like they're letting them finish up by throwing some loose dirt on top of it. They don't know anything about the tree here. And they're like, all right, let's get this done. Total photo, just trying to make themselves look like they're actually people. And here she says this.
I explained to some people who may not have had the same experience, but a lot of people will relate to this. I grew up in a neighborhood of folks who were very proud of their lawn.
Why are you smiling about that? Like, you didn't grow up in that neighborhood, because you didn't learn anything if you did. When I was a kid, I didn't focus on how proud my neighbors were of their lawns, right? Like, she has these memories from her childhood of like all the working class people that lived around her at Berkeley, right in a college town, of firemen and policemen and, nurses and things. But how would she even know? Like, you think it's like, sounds like, like some game you would play with Barbie, where there's one that's dressed like a nurse and one that's dressed like a fireman, something like that. Some make-believe community that you'd see. There goes Bobby's dad. He's a policeman. Oh, there goes Cindy's father. She's a nurse. Like some kind of whatever it was, right? And so this is just silly. These photo opportunities. It's just so fake. She's so insincere. The only thing Donald Trump has on her is Donald Trump's a lying piece of shit, but at least he is who he is. Like he lies about being a self-made man and things like that, but he doesn't try to do these fake photo ops. I mean, he does do the fake thing with the, with somebody passing out in the crowd and the shooting. But, everything else he does, it's kind of just him being like Donald Trump, even though it's, his authentic self isn't great, but he's a lot closer to being his authentic self. And, part of his authentic self is being a liar. So the New York Jets fired their head coach, and everyone's blaming Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers went on the Pat McAfee show, said he didn't have anything to do with it. Aaron Rodgers took a beating because he said he was immunized, which people took as that he got the vaccine. And it came out he didn't have the vaccine, and he was attacked by all these, sports media gossip columnist guys like Stephen A. Smith, who had always said that he loved Aaron Rodgers as a player, right? But Stephen A. Smith said something truly stupid here.
It was really, and I'm just concerned, how are you feeling? Just stop that nonsense. It's amazing how it's so difficult for folks to just simply tell the truth.
It's so difficult for folks to simply tell the truth. Now, I covered that here. And, the truther stuff. Stephen A. Smith, of course, was deceptive about the vaccine, the stuff with Kyrie Irving. We'll get back to that in a moment. But the reason people don't tell the truth is because they will be slaughtered in the media, right? If you tell the truth, it's career suicide. If people tell the truth about anything to do with politics or anything to do with current events or the, currency, like our debt, our collective debt, the national debt clock, all these things. Anything that they would tell you that's the truth would not only be career suicide, but in some cases would take down society, because we live in a society of deception. This artificial idea of what America is. And Stephen A. Smith works for Disney, right? And he works for, Disney, these subsidiaries of Disney, ABC, ESPN, which are full of deception, right? I mean, Disney is one of the most deceitful corporate entities out there, but all these media agencies are. And if they tell you the truth, I've said this so much before, our society is predicated on illusion, on us all agreeing to a certain level of deception and lies, because if we all acknowledge the truth that our currency is valueless and that our economy is insolvent, then everything would collapse. It's our belief in the system that keeps it going. As soon as Americans or people globally acknowledge that it's all an illusion, that wealth isn't really wealth and governments aren't really legitimate and aren't any really authority, they're just gangs and bullies, that all these power agencies don't really have power, then the system collapses. we can play along. Like those of us who know that currency is valueless, we still play along and we use it. Just like the people who run the system, they know it's just an illusion of money and wealth and power, but they play along, right? And, the biggest illusion is that you are here for your ego's desires for wealth and fame and, pleasure and all these things. That your life is whatever your ego wants it to be, and you have a soul and you have a purpose, and most people don't even get a whiff of what their soul's purpose is because their ego doesn't want any part of that. And so everything is illusionary. But in terms of what he's talking about here, if Aaron Rodgers talked to the owner of the Jets, who's now known as Ambassador Johnson, one of these guys, one of the Johnsons, the Johnson & Johnson heirs, has a son, and I forget the name of the video. I can look it up real quick. It's named Born Rich, and it's by Jamie Johnson, who is one of the heirs to the Johnson & Johnson Foundation. I think his father, let me look that up real quick. I think he's the brother of Woody Johnson, who now wants to be known as Ambassador Johnson, right? And he owns the New York Jets, and the team has been a disaster since he's owned the Jets. His nephew, the Jamie Johnson, made a good truther film. If you've seen the film, there's a part where he's talking to other rich children and grandchildren of, rich and famous people. And Warren Buffett, his granddaughter was going to be interviewed by Jamie Johnson. And he threatened her. She's like a single mom and she's in school. And he was going to disinherit her and, disown her if she did the interview, right? Like, these people are just savage and just brutal. And, she wasn't even going to talk shit about her grandfather. The whole thing was kind of an interesting movie. It's kind of a truther movie. And his dad had done something similar, and they all browbeat him, and his dad was like now traumatized. Kind of an interesting thing. But that's the Johnson & Johnson, their fortune. And so if Aaron Rodgers had a private conversation where he thought that the coach was the problem, or whatever was said in their conversation, they can't say that to the media. It's just silly to even, I don't know why folks just don't tell the truth, because you will slaughter them. You slaughter them things that don't even happen, that are imaginary. So Stephen A. Smith is a real piece of shit, because when Kyrie Irving, who was a real hero, I covered this extensively on my Apocalypse Now channel. Stephen A. Smith is the number one personality on ESPN. He was making $8 million a year, or maybe even more. And now he's due for a contract extension and raise. And he was skeptical about getting the vax himself, and for, racial reasons and things like Tuskegee experiment and these other things. But he went along with it because Disney made it mandatory, right? And Kyrie Irving didn't. And Kyrie Irving wasn't doing it as a statement. He said he was doing it for people who couldn't stick up for themselves. And he missed half a season, and these guys savaged him. Stephen A. Smith was one of the worst ones. And Stephen A. Smith made it personal. They got into it personally, where he disliked Kyrie. And then Stephen A. Smith and his father started to go at it on the internet, and Stephen A. was taking it out on Kyrie and talking shit about him, when he himself was just too weak to stand up to his bosses, because he came out and said that he wasn't going to give up his ESPN money, so he went and got the vax, even though he was skeptical. And he was holding that against Kyrie Irving, who was strong enough to stand up for what he believed in, right? So, don't talk about telling people the truth, because you don't do that. These guys often make up slanderous lies and, speculative things that they say just for clicks, right? And so they suck. They just suck as human beings. But then there's a comment I want to get to here. Okay, so I had a few quick comments to get to here. The first one just came in. Did I not take the screenshot of that one? Yeah, here it is. Would you rather have kayfabe or someone dumber than a bag of hammers? That is the choice. Well, that's ridiculous, silly and just stupid. Because Kamala Harris is not the person, she's just a puppet. And to say I wouldn't say that she's stupider than Trump. Trump's no rocket scientist either. He says stupid stuff all the time. He does stupid things. But the bigger problem with this person's statement is saying the kayfabe thing where Trump is lying to you and deceiving you and perpetrating this fraud is better than the alternative, because you can't have a legitimate leader. Like you there's no way we'll ever get a legitimate leader, so you might as well vote for the lesser of two evils. And that's, at a time when there's talking about the civilization collapsing, if everything was going great like it did before, or there was no talk of an apocalypse, right, when it wasn't the end of the world, who cares if it's Jimmy Carter or Ronald Reagan? Who cares if it's Gerald Ford or whoever he ran against, Jimmy Carter, or whoever it was? Who cares if it's Bill Clinton or, whatever, who he ran against, Robert Dole? Because it doesn't matter. They both suck, and America can run itself, and the people who handle them and the people who run the government. It seemed to be like America was doing great. So you didn't even really have to vote. It was just small little things, small differences in opinion, but they were all kind of on the same page. The division between the Republicans and Democrats was not nearly as big. It was just whether you wanted to participate or not, right? It doesn't really, it didn't matter. But now, civilization's collapsing all around us. Morally, what's going on with these kids, all of the stuff. We see it, and we know about it because of social media and because of the internet now. And our knowledge level is so much more than it used to be. And so now it matters that you vote, because you're going along with something that you obviously know is complete bullshit, right? And so, pick the lesser of two evils. It's no longer a valid argument. But you got to vote for somebody. So then I made this video entitled, Hilarious Biden Turns on Kamala, Trump, Mr. McMahon, and kayfabe. And so I'm talking about, both sides like I always do. And this person writes, the substance for a conspiracy is there, but if you think the FBI, CIA, and local policing is capable of falling in line for Trump, you got to check yourself into a mental rehab. So this person's saying that I should check myself into mental rehab because I believe that all these people could work to deceive the American public, right? And that this person is somehow saner than me, right? After admitting that the substance for a conspiracy is there, well, that means that you agree that this thing is bullshit, right? The Trump shooting, the ketchup game, because it is. It's just like, if you look at it, the thing about all of these conspiracies, the ones that are legitimate ones, legitimate ideas of what's going on, right? And I'll read the rest of this comment in a second. The one argument that people will give you, like Sheeple and people like that. Like one of the people that does my meditation, he worked for MIT. And he was, saying to me that he worked with governmental people all the time. And they just want to keep their jobs and keep their heads down. And the fact that they would get involved in some conspiracy or have the ability to do so is ridiculous. But what he didn't realize is that his argument actually made it more likely. Because if people are keeping their head down, and all they care about is themselves. Like he worked where everyone was trying to be the smartest guy in the building. He works for some MIT, NASA rocket science thing. And, he's managed the place. Like he talked about how, he doesn't care about it. And he was telling me that he has this book he reads every year because now he's like a supervisor. And he just has learned to butter, each person's ego, to stroke each person's ego, whether they're a person working for him or above him. And everybody loves him because he doesn't want to be the smartest guy in the room. And as long as their egos are being satisfied, like he takes like a month of vacation every year when he only gets 2 weeks and nobody says anything, right? And he just, the people who work under him, he doesn't try to compete with them like all the other supervisors. He actually, wants them to do their best work and take credit for it. He doesn't give a shit. And so the guys who work under him love him because, the other people do all that other stuff, right? Which makes it easy for them to run these conspiracies because all these people care about is their own careers and their own, in the scientific community, no one wants to go against what the consensus is. That's how the global warming thing has been perpetrated because they don't want to speak out against something that that everyone else believes is a certain way. And so, this idea that people have that all the people have to be on board with it, like all these agencies, and there's some people with integrity out there that would never let this happen. Well, whistleblowers get, it's like snitches get stitches, whistleblowers get stitches, right? Whistleblowers don't do very well, and people know it, right? So like, that's why they can perpetrate these things, because people just stick their heads in the sand, and when people argue that, well, there's no way you think about all the people have to go along with it, and that's this person's argument. So to call me insane, thinking that I should be locked up, like this is what this person just said, right? Let me read it again here. The person says, the substance for a conspiracy is there, but if you think the FBI, CIA, and local policing is capable of falling in line for Trump, you got to check yourself in a mental rehab. Now, this person's argument is completely flawed because it makes him sound like Trump is running this whatever they're doing here, and he's not. Trump is not that smart. He's just, he's an asset, right? He's their asset, which I've talked about over and over again. I can see how people become mesmerized with your rhetoric, but even you have to know he got grazed. Why? In fact, it's stupid that he got grazed, right? Like a bullet that caused no blood, and it stopped the bleeding in an area that, he says the ear just bleeds. Like people have talked about their kids getting clipped on the ear and the ear bleeding, and that the blood was dry by the time he stood up. I mean, the whole thing, I showed you the evidence, is overwhelming, right? Like it's just, you're not, I mean, the person who's saying this is locked into Trump, right? Like this person who's put their hopes into Trump. And so no matter what happens, they're going to back Trump. They're never going to believe Trump is a part of this. Even though Trump, was Trump acting on your behalf when he did Operation Warp Speed, or when he closed down the economy, or any number of things that he did, right? Trump has shown over and over again that he's a lying piece of shit, all the way back to when he did The Apprentice, right? There's a story RFK Jr. said where Trump was completely on board with his anti-bloop stuff, right? And when he was a part of the Trump administration, and he was going to act on it, and then Pfizer gave Trump $1 million, and then he backed off on the RFK stuff. That's years ago. And now he's back at his camp, but like Trump he's that guy. Like he'll always take self-interest over, he doesn't believe in anything. Like he flirted with gun control. Remember when Dianne Feinstein and her, she was like, she had a ghoulgasm, like how much Trump was going to give her on gun control. And then people talked to him about it. Like he was talking about police seizing money, whatever that is, forfeiture, asset forfeiture. And he was like, why would anybody be against it, right? Police just seizing your money. Like he had no idea. Like he had no idea about the NRA. He doesn't care about anything. Like it's just he cares about Trump. You got to know he got grazed. People actually died, including the man on the rooftop. If you can convince us of somehow that the government is complicit in helping Trump by humanizing him and allowing him to get people shot and one man die, I'll listen. I'll never get shy of a good story. Of course, something this big controversial wouldn't have any sources to reference, so it would consist of some good investigation on your end with proof. Legend doesn't always fill in the gaps. However, as an independent who only wants Trump to win because I hate Democrats and Republicans, I'm all ears, buddy. Well, that's just silly. Like, the evidence is just right there in front of you. That Trump is a lying piece of shit. He cheated on all of his wives, and one of them with a porn star. And then he paid the porn star over $100,000 through a lawyer he later threw under the bus, right? And Trump knew that people who are Christian and people who might vote for him later on might find it difficult for them to believe that he slept with a porn star, right? And, courted her in the whole weird relationship. That if she told her story, it would hurt his candidacy. So he bribed her. Then he lied about it, right? He's still lying about it, but everyone knows he's done this stuff. He's a liar and a despicable person. And if he's doing that to his wives, he'll do it to you. I mean, he's been caught lying across the board. He's always been a liar, a scumbag. And he's, has no sense of anything, right? And so for a person to say, you got to check yourself into a mental rehab. Why? Because I don't believe the government that lies and does these kind of things all the time. I mean, if you think about all the things that have happened that have been false flags and psychological operations, you'll believe them, but you won't believe the one that involves Trump. When it's so obvious, it's WWE format. It's, he's not doing this for smart people. He's doing it for stupid people. He's doing it for people who believe in WWE and shit like that, right? Like, he's not doing this for people who can, use critical thinking skills. But the big question remains, why do they keep Trump around? Why do they make Trump the center of everything for the past 8 years? Because he's their asset. And so he is working for the CIA, knowingly or unknowingly, right? He's working for all these agencies. So they have made Trump the center of the news media and American culture since 2016. Briefly after he fucked up the election in 2020, they disappeared him off of social media, but they still were talking about Trump constantly with January 6th. Only Trump didn't have his own voice. And then they gave him back his own voice. I said Trump should have done Truth Social before the election. He should have known that this was going to, they were capable of deplatforming him. They deplatformed the sitting president. He was in the White House as president, and they took him off all social media. And they know the news media didn't cover anything he was saying. And they ran out off their own Trump stuff. And then they put him back on social media, and they made him again have a voice, which he has now, which they can erase anytime they want. They can just kill him. They can throw him in jail. They can do any number of things, throw him in prison. Like, he's completely at their mercy, as is everyone else in terms of these types of things. Only people who work for God, only people who are beyond the material, governmental situation have any sort of autonomy from the beastly system. All these people who are rich and powerful, and they've been made famous by the beast, and their lifestyle is supported by the beast. They're all in on it, right? They have to be. They are owned. They're all owned. Like, we're all slaves to something. Either a slave to God or you're a slave to the system. It's like you're going to be a slave to something. Like, that's your role on planet Earth. You're a slave to your food, to your, to your safety, to your, to air you breathe, to, any number of things that you need, right? Your habits, your addictions. People are all slaves to something, right? And that's how you're owned. Like, slave to the, people threaten your family. They'll do whatever they can to compromise you. And they can just suppress your voice. Like, it happens to all of us in social media who are talking about legitimate things. Our voice is being suppressed. So it only affects a few people. That really has no effect on the bigger scheme of the system. But even if it wasn't suppressed, it doesn't matter, because people don't have the ability to contradict or turn this thing around. But they need a patsy, and the patsy is Trump, right? I mean, if Trump gets elected, he's the patsy. If Kamala gets elected, she's the patsy. But the system is collapsing because it has no other choice. I've showed you all the other documentation, right? And to say that I'm crazy and I should be locked up, this is what this person's saying. When they're saying they're saner than me because they believe in Trump, right? Their argument is they've bought into a guy who's a perpetual liar and has defined himself. And we already saw what a Trump presidency looks like. There's no surprises from Trump. He ain't going to surprise anybody, right? He's gotten older, and he's worse, and he's bitter, and he's more self-centered. And, he's more of a piece of shit than he was when he got elected the first time. Like, he's gone in the wrong direction morally and every other way, right? And it's easy to see. I mean, anybody with an open mind would see it. But, this little bit about saying I should be locked up, like, that's this idea that, what I'm saying here means that I should be institutionalized. Like, this is a person who claims to be a Trumper, right? You're against censorship, but when I say this, you got to check yourself into a mental rehab. Okay, Dr. frickin' Trump dope, right? Like, you Trump moron, you Trump cult follower. I'll take your advice. I'll check myself into a mental rehab because you're such a well-versed, successful, well-adjusted person. You must, your advice is impeccable. It's just silly, right? When this person themselves said there's compelling evidence for a conspiracy. But if you think the FBI and the CIA are working for Trump, no, they're not working for Trump. Trump's working for them. Trump is their guy. And if they elect him again, there's a reason for it. And you'll see it, and you'll be like, oh, my God, this isn't going the way I thought it would. No, because Trump was never the guy that you thought he was. Like, he never was that guy. He's just about Trump. He's not a good leader. He's gone bankrupt 6 times. Like, he's a piece of shit, right? Trump is a piece of shit, and he always was. And even if he wasn't, he couldn't do anything. Even if Trump is the greatest spiritual, wonderful person, altruistic. The system can't be saved. There's nothing he can do, nothing anybody can do. And so the whole thing is silly. Like, just silly little people, trying to find some desperate little, thing to believe in, then rather just face the truth that's so obviously there in front of them. The system's fucked. And, to a certain extent, we're all fucked with it, right? I mean, it's just, it's just a matter of time before everything that we know as our civilization and our life collapses. It's just our days are numbered. Civilizations collapse, empires collapse, and ours is collapsing. It just happens. It's not like some horrific thing unless you're a part of that empire. Unless you're dependent on that empire, then it sucks, and it sucks for all of us. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing to the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful. Okay, so I've made hours and hours of videos about all the ways that Daji has separated himself and in some ways completely reversed, in some cases completely reversed the Sajmark teachings and the teachings of Charji and Babaji. And so those videos have been copyrighted. The mission, the Heartfulness debacle, the Heartfulness cult has copyrighted those videos, so I can't show them to you. I have all these evidence of, whatever. This is what I do for a living. And it was very easy to find all the times that, the Brighter Minds scam, all these things, they're just goofy. Like, they're stupid on top of being, like, blasphemous and whatever. And that he's thrown Charji under the bus. But either way, whether you want to believe that or not, they're not reprinting Charji's works. Whatever you want to believe, it's not my problem. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't care if you believe Daji's great or whatever. Whatever your reason for staying with Daji, and, that's your business and nothing to do with me. So this is about something completely different. But the evidence is overwhelming that the Heartfulness is not republishing Charji's works. Lots of his works have disappeared completely. And so I've known about this problem. And maybe it's God's will that all of the literature disappear. Like maybe Daji is somehow doing God's work because there's going to be, that human beings in the future, and he's talked about, Babaji talked about this himself in various places, and then, of course, the Whispers of the Brighter World messages. There's a prophecy of all these upheavals that's given in the Whispers of the Brighter World messages and all the messages that go along with that. But Babaji said, in my vision in Reality at Dawn, which might be considered like the Bible, Sajmarg, Reality at Dawn, at the end of the book, he talked about how there'd be a new paradigm, a new world that would be built on the bones and ashes of the previous world, right? And that no country, no nation would survive without spirituality as its base. And he's talked about that in more detail in the Whispers of the Brighter World messages, where he said that people are going to have a genetic mutation. There's all this junk DNA, which they call junk DNA, hidden potential, right? Unrealized potential in every human being. If you look at Babaji being an example of an evolved person, something that we could all evolve into later on as as there's this movement towards spiritual evolution. And Babaji's ability to intercommune and go directly to the source, let's say, there's all these supposed indigo children, all these people. So let's say that there's going to be a time where there's going to be no need for books because everyone's going to be able to connect so deeply to the source, a la Babaji, a la these masters, where they could get knowledge directly through their meditative process and no longer need books and external data, then fine. That Charji, they can connect to Charji directly. And so if his literature is lost, it's no tragedy. But that's a possibility. But until that time, Charji's work has value. And just because Daji has some kind of, whatever's happened with Daji and his whatever, his insecurities, his, trying to compete with Charji, his disliking Charji, whatever it might be, and the Heartfulness organization, and they have, they have the copyrights. They're the only ones who can reprint these books, right? They're the only ones who can do anything to, to make sure that this stuff is preserved. In fact, there was a time early on where Daji was printing everything in archival paper because of the predictions, the prophecies. There's an epic prophecy in the Whispers of the Brighter World that in 25 years from 2001, which is now, with 2025, 2026, the end of 2025, the beginning of 2026. If it was given in February 2020, February of 2001. So 25 years from them would be February of 2026, right? That there was going to be a big major upheaval. And then there would be a series of them. And then all the predictions and prophecies and work that Babaji did to rework the world and make it to where spirituality would become something that you had to embrace to survive. Like just because of the conditions on planet Earth and the depopulation of all maybe the negative or lower developed souls, so that there could be an upward movement, right? And so Daji started making books in archival paper so they could be preserved. And then he stopped. I don't know. He's done a lot of things where he starts something, he stops them, right? But so there's that. So anyways, the point of this video is that there is this work out there, and there are a lot of you who have, maybe you guys come across this video. A lot of people who are older Abhyasis, who are boomer hippies in America, and, Charji people, maybe you knew Babaji a little bit, and you have a vast library of books. And you don't have kids who do Saj Marg. You don't have younger people. I mean, there's Abhyasis. The ones doing Heartfulness don't even know who Charji is. They don't value it, right? And so we need to preserve this epic amount of work. As long as it's available, we should preserve it. If, if God wills it, if Babaji, this work is supposed to disappear, then yeah, that's, then we can't do anything to stop it. But until that time, it still has value to people. New people who don't have access to it only have crappy, dodgy books to read and things like this. And so, there's some of these videos that are up on various channels on YouTube, some of Charji stuff, and there's some other things that are out there. But for the most part, Charji stuff has disappeared. And so, like, if you don't have somebody to will these books to, the books could be destroyed. They might make it into, like, bookstores somewhere or something like that. But you should make a plan. Like, if you have kids and you're leaving a will, and you should advise them to do something with these books. And if you don't have a plan, send them to me, because I'll do my best to preserve these books. And so people can contact me through this channel and through Positive Future Gmail and things like this. But if you're an older Abhyasi, or you have access to these things, or your kids, like my preceptor Fred, I tried to contact his ex-wife, and I didn't know where to. I'm not sure where if he's even still alive. I tried to contact him, but there's people out there who have just wonderful wealth of knowledge and books and things, and some of these things once in a while appear on some kind of. I mean, they make it into some used bookstore, something on eBay or something, but for the most part, they are, they're going to disappear. And if there is some sort of, if these predictions come true and the world is, disrupted in some way and the current system is destroyed, then this literature will be destroyed with it. And if that's God's will, it's God's will, like I said. But if it isn't, then we should do our best to preserve these books. Have a plan. Come up with some way to pass these books on to somebody who values them, where people can get access to them in the future. Because, it may be a future life for yourself. You come back and you read one of Charji's books, and all this, it's like a trigger for all this information from your previous existence, this life, and your Abhyas is there, right? I mean, who knows the value of these works, but we've already experienced them. And so please do something about it, right? Like, just think about it, be proactive about this. As you get older, people getting older, come up with some kind of, or, if you know older Abhyasis, have a talk with them about this. Because, again, these books are going to disappear, and then Charji's legacy will be gone. And if that, like I said, if that's God's will, it's God's will. But if it's not, then it would be a shame for us to not act and not do something to preserve this, I mean, this wonderful person's work, this work that affected all of us, his epic content that was transformative for so many of us. And why rob future generations of that content when we could do something about it? Anyways, just something to think about. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely important for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.